Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 751 The Original Witch. According to the agreement with the church, by eliminating Sieglinde, whose overall strength was close to that of a Sequence 5, George could most likely obtain a Sequence 5 potion in exchange. After all, Sieglinde wasn't an ordinary Sequence 6, but a renowned naval general, and his infiltration of Baklan was to assassinate Duke Negan, making his status significantly different. Crusade had previously promised this. The process went smoothly. Crusade not only provided all the necessary ingredients for a Sequence 6 faceless man, but also told George that once he digested the potion, he could return to him for the Sequence 5 Mystic Master Potion. However, Crusade also mentioned that if the church needed to mobilize mermaids to assist him in the ritual, there would be an additional fee. The fee would be the same as the cost of obtaining the Sequence 5 potion, killing a Sequence 5 cultist or rescuing a Sequence 5 church out of control individual. George readily agreed, as this wasn't difficult for him. Even without the church's mermaids, he could find one in the deep sea to experience the ritual. He would soon convert his search magic as well. After preparing the advancement potion, George swallowed it in one gulp, successfully advancing to Sequence 6 Faceless Man. He also gained all the Faceless Man's abilities. Compared to Sequence 7 magicians, Sequence 6 Faceless Man, besides significantly enhancing all magicians' abilities, has the most unique feature, the ability to shapeshift. He can permanently transform into people of different appearances, but only superficially, without affecting the substance. The size difference isn't too great. Initially, he can only grow taller or shorter by 10 centimeters, and exceeding that range is difficult. The size of the head is also limited. It only involves the person themselves and cannot change clothing. He can mimic the voice of a target. Once heard, it can be reproduced, but this is limited to the realm of ordinary people. Of course, this is the normal shapeshifting ability of a faceless man. With a faceless man's abilities as a reference, George can easily convert various shapeshifting magics from other worlds. At that time, he won't just be able to change his appearance, but will be comparable to the 72 transformations, able to transform into whatever he wants. Even becoming a dragon wouldn't be a problem. He could now transform into a dragon, but without the transformation, the true gods and creators of this world would immediately notice the anomaly. They would sense that his change didn't conform to the power system of this world. But the transformed dragon wouldn't be like that. It would only make people think that he had developed the faceless man's abilities to their fullest extent and improved and sublimated them. How do I digest the faceless man's potion? After understanding the faceless man's abilities, George gradually had some guesses about how to digest the faceless man's potion. According to the method of disguise, to digest the faceless man's potion, he would most likely need to disguise himself as someone else and not be discovered. Moreover, it was very likely that the higher the strength of the person he was disguised as, the more sensational the event they could create, the better the digestion effect would be. No rush, let me convert more magic before digesting. The more magic he converted, the stronger he could exert. So that the effect of disguising himself as someone else would be better, and the faster he could digest the potion. Especially if he could convert memory magic, he could completely obtain a person's complete memories through soul searching. He could also completely replace that person to complete the digestion of the potion. 3 days later, George, who was researching conversion magic, suddenly opened his eyes. "Klein wants to see me," he sensed the call of the gray mist, and since it wasn't time for the tarot gathering yet, it meant Klein had other matters to discuss. His soul separated from his body and followed the gray mist into its space. George saw a palm-sized golem carved from white bone. The golem vaguely resembled a beautiful woman with incredibly long hair that reached her ankles, each strand distinct and thick like a venomous snake. At the tip of each hair was carved an eye, some closed, some open, densely packed. "Is this the golem of the primordial witch?" George's eyes lit up at the sight of the golem in Klein's hand. In this world, the 7 righteous gods had no concrete forms, but the evil gods each possessed unique appearances. For example, The true creator worshipped by the Aurora Society was depicted as an upside-down giant. The primordial witch, revered by the witch cult, had an appearance identical to the golem in Klein's hand. If the golem in Klein's hands was indeed a genuine golem of the primordial witch, then it was connected to the primordial witch, and he could use divination to glean some of her knowledge. Yes, it's spoils we seized from a Sequence 6 pleasure witch. Klein explained the origin of the primordial witch golem. It turned out that a few days earlier, a major scandal had occurred in Tingen City. Tingen City Councilor Maynard and a beautiful and alluring noble widow, Mrs. Sharon, had a sexual encounter in a room during a banquet, under the influence of alcohol. Due to the intense experience, the elderly Councilor Maynard died suddenly in bed. Mrs. Maynard refused to believe her husband's death, firmly believing that Mrs. Sharon had murdered him. She then contacted Blackthorn Security Company, the company that the Night Watcher's headquarters ostensibly disguised as. Klein accepted the mission, utilizing the advantage of the gray fog space that allowed him to move in spirit form, and discovered that Mrs. Sharon's true identity might be a witch. The matter was then reported to Captain Dunn, who, along with Klein and another teammate, Cohen, used the sealed artifact, the Mirror of the Spirit Communicator, to capture Madame Sharon. The original plan was for Dunn, whose strength was close to Sequence 6, to use his nightmare ability to control Madame Sharon and force her into a dream, while Klein and Cohen would then use the Mirror of the Spirit Communicator to completely eliminate her. However, things didn't go as planned. Because Madame Sharon was holding the golem of the Primal Witch at the time, she was immune to Dunn's dream entry. This resulted in the three being ambushed by Madame Sharon, who was Sequence 6. Normally, 2 Sequence 8s and 1 Sequence 7 ambushed by a Sequence 6, even with Dunn's strength approaching Sequence 6, would likely result in heavy casualties. Fortunately, Klein had the magical pacifier given to him by George. The moment they encountered danger upon entering the house, he had Madame Sharon take a hit from the Samadhi fire. Because the Samadhi fire also greatly damages the soul of a Sequence 6, Madame Sharon's ambush failed, leaving her frozen in place. She was then killed on the spot by a combined attack from Klein, Cohen, and Dunn. After killing Mrs. Sharon, before sealing the Primal Witch golem inside the Karis Gate in the Night Watcher's basement, Klein secretly took it into the Grey Mist dimension under a pretext. Well done. Upon hearing this, George took the Primal Witch golem and immediately began divination. Chapter 752 The Angry and Zangwil. An image identical to the Primal Witch golem appeared before George's eyes, along with the potion recipes for the Primal Witch's sequence pathways. Sequence 9, Assassin. Sequence 8, Instigator. Sequence 7, Witch. Sequence 6, Pleasure. Sequence 5, Pain. Sequence 4, Despair. Sequence 3, Immortality. Sequence 2, Catastrophe. Just as George was about to obtain the Sequence 1 potion recipe and related information, the Primal Witch blocked his divination. Like the hidden sage before her, the Primal Witch instinctively launched a counterattack against George the moment she realized she was being divined. Naturally, it was useless. The divination continued. So the Primal Witch began to attack George with all her might according to the divination lines, but with 99% of the damage blocked by the Grey Mist, it was still useless. Finally, realizing she couldn't harm the diviner at all, she simply severed the divination. This witch pathway is really a bit abnormal. George wasn't bothered by being blocked from divination. He had done this 3 times before and knew it would end like this. However, he still felt somewhat moved by the knowledge he had gained about the witch's path. Although he had previously learned from Klein that the witch's path might turn men into women, he hadn't expected it to be true. Those who possess the witch's path, upon advancing to Sequence 7 Witch, would completely transform from men into pure women, and not just any women, but incredibly beautiful and charming ones. Furthermore, upon advancing to Sequence 6 Pleasure, to process the potion, they would have to bring immense pleasure to both men and women. It could be understood as becoming a living bodhisattva, spreading blessings everywhere. As a man, just thinking about it felt incredibly perverse. Although he had a clone of Misaka Mikado, his body was female, but his heart was that of a pure man, and he could already transform into a man. But this witch's path essentially transformed a man, body and soul, towards womanhood. "How are you?" Klein asked with concern. During the Primal Witch's attack, he had kept his distance, afraid of being caught in the crossfire. Even with 99% of its power blocked, it was still something a Sequence 8 like him couldn't withstand. This guy reacted quickly, Only getting Sequence 9 to Sequence 2 information, George shared the information he had obtained with Klein. Klein was also dumbfounded after reading it, because he thought that since Mrs. Sharon was a Sequence 6 witch, it meant that she was originally a man. If Mrs. Sharon was a man in disguise, then Mrs. Sharon's husband and those men in Tenjin City who had affairs with her. If he remembered correctly, it was said that 80% of the men in Tenjin City's upper circles had a relationship with Mrs. Sharon. Give me your pacifier. After sharing the information about the primordial witch, George took Klein's pacifier, fiddled with it for a while, and then threw it back to him. I upgraded it for you. Now it can even cause some damage to Sequence 5 Extraordinary. He had advanced to Sequence 6 Faceless Man, and the spiritual energy in his body had increased significantly. With the spiritual energy he had converted, upgrading the pacifier was naturally no problem. Tenjin City, such a small place, actually had a Sequence 6 Extraordinary hidden there. Who knows, maybe one day a Sequence 5 or Sequence 4 will appear. Klein. This tool is actually quite useful now. I can pay more attention to him. It can damage Sequence 5. Klein took the upgraded pacifier from George, once again marveling at how incredibly powerful his fellow countryman was. With his pacifier, he was stronger than the captain. Of course, that meant a one-on-one duel. Otherwise, if the captain ambushed him, his nightmare ability would take him down instantly. He wouldn't even have time to use the pacifier. Meanwhile, in the same room with the dark red chimney, Zangwill, looking at the contents of his notebook, slammed his hand on the table in anger. What's wrong with Klein? He keeps disrupting my plans. In his story, Klein was supposed to die in his initial suicide attempt, but unexpectedly survived. He was just an ordinary person, which wouldn't have affected his plans. But later, he joined the Night Watchers and became an extraordinary. And recently, Klein even taught the acting technique to Dunn, significantly alleviating Dunn's mental pollution. This greatly disrupted his plans. All his previous groundwork was primarily designed to cause Dunn, the captain of the Night Watch, to suffer mental breakdowns in a plausible way. Whether it was arranging for him to obtain the Antigonus family's notes or investigating the Aurora Society members' dreams of seeing the true creator, it was all to continuously corrupt his mind. This would ensure he made the wrong decision when facing the evil god's offspring, bringing the Saint's ashes out of Charnus Gate for the battle. This would allow him to effortlessly obtain the Saint's ashes, extract the extraordinary characteristics of the Dark Path Sequence 4, and successfully advance to Sequence 4. However, because Dunn obtained the acting method from Klein, his mental corruption was significantly alleviated, and he might even be able to fully digest the potion and advance to Sequence 6 in a short time. If that were the case, his entire plan would essentially fail. A Sequence 7 Dunn, wielding the Saint's ashes, could unleash near demigod power. But if he advanced to Sequence 6 and still held the Saint's ashes, he could essentially unleash the Saint's full power, easily luring the evil god's offspring behind Charnus Gate to defeat him, leaving Dunn with no chance. So, using the 0-08 sealed artifact, he arranged for Mrs. Sharon to kill Counselor John Maynard when the time wasn't right. He then cleverly orchestrated for the Night Watchers to discover the truth and arrest him. Coincidentally, he arranged for Mrs. Sharon to sleep with a golem of the Primal Witch, thus avoiding Dunn's nightmare abilities. This way, both Klein and Corinne would be killed by Mrs. Sharon, and Dunn would, as usual, consume their extraordinary properties, interrupting the potion's digestion and causing his mind to be corrupted again. Unfortunately, Klein, this variable, somehow acquired a powerful sealed artifact, which he used to kill Mrs. Sharon. I can't wait any longer, or the chance will only become slimmer. After pacing around the room a few times, Zangwill made his decision. He decided to stop hiding behind the scenes and take matters into his own hands. Otherwise, as Klein's power grew, and Dunn fully digested the potion and advanced to Sequence 6, his plan to obtain the Saint's ashes would become increasingly difficult. It was better to take the initiative now and gamble it out himself. While this might be somewhat dangerous, and controlling things from behind the scenes wouldn't offer the same level of assurance as operating from behind the scenes, he still considered the success rate to be as high as 90%. After all, Dunn, the strongest member of the Tenjin City Nightwalker squad, was only close to Sequence 6, actually still Sequence 7. He, on the other hand, was Sequence 5, and still possessed the 0-08 sealed artifact. Chapter 753 A Vicious Plan. The next day, Megas, heavily pregnant, suddenly had the idea to go to Zockland Street to find the Blackthorn Security Company. She felt she should ask about Lanius, perhaps they had found clues about him. She was received by Klein and Leonard. Through his spiritual intuition, combined with all the cases that had occurred recently, Klein sensed that a terrible being might be growing inside Megas. He also realized that someone seemed to be manipulating everything behind the scenes. He instructed Leonard to calm Megas down and quickly reported the situation to Captain Dunn. Dunn ordered Klein to evacuate all non-combat personnel immediately, while he himself telegraphed everything that had happened to the Sanctuary headquarters, requesting support. He initially considered using the ashes of the saint, the core of the Charnus Gate seal, but quickly rejected the plan. He thought the saint's ashes might stimulate the being inside Megas, causing things to escalate to the worst possible outcome. After all, they not only had to deal with the being inside Megas, but also guard against the person who was orchestrating all of this. Therefore, he only had two choices. First, they could buy time. Megas's child wasn't due yet, allowing the Holy See to send reinforcements. Second, they could lure Megas into the Karis Gate for a final showdown. This would unleash the full power of the Saint's ashes and utilize all the sealed artifacts. Furthermore, the Karis Gate seal would deter any potential schemers, buying time to recover after the battle. After a moment's hesitation, he chose the first option. Even if the second option succeeded, more than half of the Night Watchers would likely perish. At that moment, Klein, having just evacuated the non-combatants, unhesitatingly took out a pacifier, put it in his mouth, and activated his spiritual energy. Complex patterns lit up the pacifier, and a flame suddenly appeared before him, transforming into George's likeness. Indeed, he had used the pacifier to summon George, who was in Backlund. The baby in Megas's womb was either an evil god, its offspring, or at the very least, a mythical creature, potentially capable of utterly destroying Tenjin City. His colleagues and family were there, and he didn't dare gamble, so he quickly sought help from his powerful fellow villager, George. "What's going on?" George looked around, somewhat puzzled, and asked Klein. He had thought Klein had encountered some enemy, but upon closer inspection, there were no enemies at all, and the location was right in the Night Watch headquarters. "George, something big has happened. An evil god might be about to descend," Klein quickly explained the situation. George was stunned. He hadn't expected it to be because of his older cousin, Megaeus. "I know her situation. Don't worry, I have a way to handle it. You follow your captain's instructions first. I'll hide in the shadows and see who's behind this." He had already converted his sealing magic and had only planned to return to Tenjin to resolve his cousin Megaeus's problem. He hadn't expected Megaeus's issue to involve so many other problems, with others manipulating things behind the scenes. Thinking about it, it made sense. How could a mere greedy conman cause such a big commotion? If an evil god could descend upon this world so easily, the world would have been finished long ago. He had genuinely overlooked this point before. So he decided not to act rashly and wait for the person behind it all to reveal themselves. This also gave him a chance to complete the Faceless Man's Potion Digestion. The Faceless Man's Potion Digestion involved impersonating someone else and making that person known to many. The more famous the person, the better the potion digestion. Preventing and sealing the evil god's descent and saving Tenjin City perfectly fit the criteria. Good. Hearing that George already knew about Megas' situation and had a solution, Klein breathed a sigh of relief and left to meet up with Captain Dunn. George, using the Faceless Man and his newly acquired shape-shifting ability, transformed from an infant into a young man in the blink of an eye. He then activated stealth, concealing his presence and hiding in the shadows. Eye of detection. A phantom eye silently appeared above the Blackthorn Security Company. "That's the guy. Judging from the intensity of his spiritual energy, he's probably around sequence 5, similar to crusade before his advancement. But that quill pen in his hand is quite interesting." Using his eye of detection, George quickly spotted another extraordinary individual hidden in the darkness, just like himself. Approaching the person from behind, he saw the quill pen in front of him rapidly writing in an ordinary notebook, and his eyes lit up with interest. Megas, inexplicably summoned, arrived on Zockland Street and entered Blackthorn Security. Her unborn child was in a critical stage, so her impulse couldn't be stopped. Dunn, greatly mitigated by the role-playing technique, made the perfectly correct decision. He wanted to buy time and await the Sanctuary's support. Klein sensed the impending danger and summoned an unknown ally using the strange artifact that had severely injured Mrs. Sharon. Zengwil sensed the danger, but his desire for advancement didn't deter him. Zengwil reached for a quill and wrote in his notebook, "For unknown, inexplicable reasons, a meteor suddenly changed its trajectory and struck this planet. Its landing point happened to be Blackthorn Security." Yes, exactly. A single meteor obviously cannot destroy the Karis Gate, built around the relics of the saint, but his target is not the Karis Gate. His target is Megas. Megas is the mother of the true creator's offspring, and she absolutely cannot die. Therefore, in the event of a life-threatening crisis, the true creator's offspring will inevitably hatch prematurely to withstand the crisis. If the true creator's offspring can absorb all the power and be born successfully, its strength will directly reach the level of a Sequence 2 angel. Afterwards, with this angel's body, the true creator can truly descend into this world. This is something he does not want to see, because he dares to scheme against a true creator, and the true creator will not let him off in the end. But if it is born prematurely now, its strength will at most not exceed Sequence 4. In order to absorb power to restore its strength to Sequence 2 and allow the true creator to descend, the true creator's offspring will inevitably slaughter the entire city of Tingen. And done, in order to stop the true creator's offspring, will use the saint's ashes to fight to the death. At that time, no matter who wins or loses, he can reap the benefits afterward. If we all perish together, that would be even easier. Chapter 754 Angels Descend on Tingen. Inside the hall, Leonard, Klein, and Dunn were all trying their best to calm Megadeth. However, all three were prepared for battle at any moment. Leonard carried a thick, stiff blood vessel in his pocket, the sealed artifact 2-105, the blood vessel thief. The wearer had the opportunity to steal one ability from a target within a certain range. The old man within him could help him maximize the theft ability of this sealed artifact. Klein had a sun talisman made from a mutated sun emblem in his pocket. It had no side effects and was extremely lethal. At the same time, he had already taken out the upgraded pacifier that George had given him, ready to use it at any time. Captain Dunn did not go to get the Saint's ashes. He knew that the Saint's ashes would definitely stimulate the entity within Megadeth, and without the suppression of the Saint's ashes, there would also be problems within the Charnus Gate. Therefore, he took the quiet hair that he had used to control Old Neil. If a problem arose, he would first use the quiet hair to control Megadeth, and then have Cohen, who was on standby, go to the Charnus Gate to retrieve the Saint's ashes. Eek! Just when everyone thought they could hold out until reinforcements from the Holy Temple arrived, Megas's stomach suddenly emitted a sharp, infantile cry. The sound was filled with rage and a strange, corrupting influence. Immediately afterward, Megas's hair fell out, and her body began to mutate, transforming in the blink of an eye into a monster wielding two eerie white bone swords. The only thing that remained unchanged was her protruding belly. However, she didn't attack Dunn and the others. Instead, she looked up at the ceiling of the hall and blasted it away with a single strike. Following Megas's gaze instinctively, Klein and the others' expressions changed drastically. A meteorite wreathed in flames was hurtling towards them. Cohen, go get the Saint's ashes, Dunn roared behind him, about to use his silence hair to suppress Megas. At this point, there was no time to wait for reinforcements. They had to fight back. Whether it's stopping the meteorite or dealing with the entity within Megaeus's womb, the sanctuary's ashes are needed. Captain, don't act yet, Klein suddenly flashed in front of Dunn, stopping him from immediately attacking Megaeus. Klein had received a telepathic message from George. Let her deal with the meteorite. Dunn, hearing this, immediately calmed down. The situation was clearly that the meteorite had stimulated the entity within Megaeus, causing it to erupt prematurely in its attempt to save itself. Instead of dealing with the entity within Megaeus and the meteorite now, it was better to let the entity within Megaeus deal with the meteorite. This would also weaken the power of the entity within Megaeus. Eek! Another sharp cry of a baby rang out. Megaeus crossed her twin swords, and just as the meteorite was about to hit Blackthorn Corporation, she leaped up and slashed at it. The eerie white bone blade struck the meteorite, instantly shattering it into countless fragments that scattered across the sky. However, Megaeus was also rebounded by the force of the falling meteorite, causing one of her arms to explode. At this moment, Cohenly retrieved the Saint's ashes and handed them to Dunn, also taking the strand of quiet hair. Attacked together, Dunn took the Saint's ashes and immediately infused them with all his spiritual energy, unleashing their full power to attack the still recovering Megaeth. The urn opened, and countless cold, tentacle-like threads instantly enveloped Megaeth. Neither the green flames burning on her body nor the flowing corrosive blasphemous liquid could harm the threads. "You must die!" With a roar, Dunn was sent flying by an invisible force, slamming against the wall, cracking it and causing him to cough up blood. But he still didn't put down the urn, continuing to channel his spiritual energy. Meanwhile, Cohen Lee also threw out a strand of quiet hair to assist the threads emanating from the ashes, further trapping Megadeth. Leonard used the blood vessel thief to temporarily steal Megadeth's voice, preventing her from uttering further curses. Klein simultaneously activated the Sun Rune and the pacifier, attacking Megadeth's stomach. After a blinding flash of light and flame, Megadeth's head and the remaining skeletal arm were reduced to ashes. However, she was still not dead. Eek! A sharp infant's cry rang out again, this time louder than before. A crack appeared in Megadeth's stomach, and a jet-black infant arm emerged from within. The offspring of the evil god was about to descend prematurely. However, even so, the black threads extending from the saint's ashes remained unyielding. This was because the seal artifact of the same sequence, the quiet hair, amplified its power, and combined with the previous efforts to deal with the meteorite and resist Klein and Leonard's attacks, the offspring of the evil god had consumed a considerable amount of energy. However, this was only temporary. Once the offspring of the evil god fully emerged from Megadeth's stomach, it would be able to break free of its restraints. However, due to the fact that a telegram had already been sent to the Church of the Storm Lord's Punisher and the mechanical heart of the Church of Steam and Machinery, so it wouldn't be long before the Punishers and the extraordinary ones of the mechanical heart arrived with their seals to help. If things continued this way, they would surely be able to easily deal with the evil god's offspring. However, how could Zangwill, hidden in the shadows, allow things to develop this way? While the two sides were locked in a stalemate, he had already quietly appeared behind Dunn, extending a pale, corpse-like hand and sending Dunn flying. Severely injured by the sneak attack, Dunn immediately lost control of the saint's ashes. Without the saint's ashes, the black silk, relying solely on its hair, was unable to control the evil god's offspring. The pitch-black infant, imbued with the blasphemous power, quickly burst forth. Just one glance was enough to make Klein, Leonard, and Cohen feel their minds corrupted. Captain, at this moment, they no longer cared about the mental corruption. To save their captain, they immediately shifted their attacks to the one who had attacked him. Zangwill completely ignored the three's attacks, instead reaching for the box containing the saint's ashes. He would leave immediately upon receiving the saint's ashes. As for the true offspring of the Creator, his current strength was insufficient for Sequence 4, and he would certainly be killed by the successors of the Punishers and the Mechanical Heart. However, before that, the Night Watchers would likely be slaughtered, and many ordinary people nearby would also be caught in the crossfire and die. But what did that have to do with him? However, just as his hand was about to touch the urn, a warm and soft light instantly illuminated the entire hall. Immediately afterwards, a youth filled with holiness, with 12 pairs of angel wings behind him, slowly descended. This person was none other than George, who had made a dazzling appearance at the perfect moment to digest the faceless man's potion. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 755 Instant Kill. Ashes, come. George beckoned with his finger, and the urn containing the saint's ashes immediately flew up and landed in George's hand. Seeing his prize about to slip away, Zangwill was far from willing to give up. Die, as a top-tier Sequence 5 gatekeeper who nearly failed to advance to Sequence 4 undead, his direct combat strength was considerable. Even if this unknown being seemed powerful, how could he know without fighting? A few fake wings, and he thought he was an angel? He pushed hard, and a bronze door covered in mysterious, indescribable patterns appeared before him, creaking and cracking open. Within the crack was endless darkness, from which countless indescribable eyes gazed outwards. As if summoned by Zangwill, undead arms from deep within the door reached out to grab George, trying to drag him inside. That's all, George scoffed. Super magic, fairy's radiance, a magnificent, pure, and blazing pillar of light descended from the sky, enveloping the gate of the dead. The screams of the undead echoed throughout Tingen. In just a few seconds, the gate to the underworld slammed shut and vanished. Priest of Light, Zangwill's expression changed drastically. The attack the opponent used resembled the holy light of his own, a sequence 5 light priest. He couldn't understand how a single holy light could destroy the gate of the underworld he had opened if the opponent was sequence 5. He was also sequence 5, and had almost reached sequence 4. Could the opponent be sequence 4? Seeing the urn in George's hands, a flicker of hesitation crossed Zangwill's eyes. He turned to escape using the underworld's escape method. He only had one chance. If he failed, he had to leave immediately. Otherwise, not to mention that what's before him might be a sequence 4 being, the support from the mechanical heart, the Punisher, and the sanctuary is almost here. He has the 0-08 sealed artifact, the Pen of Al-Shigad. With patience, he can eventually obtain the Saint's ashes. Did I let you leave? Seeing the operator who had been hiding behind him trying to escape, George snapped his fingers. The ground instantly turned into a mirror, and everyone present, including Zangwill, the offspring of the evil god, Klein, and others, were all dragged into it. Because he had previously obtained a lot of mystical knowledge about the solar sequence from the Eternal Sun, he had converted many light magic spells. The fairy radiance he just used was one of them, but because it had to adapt to the power rules of this world and was converted according to the mystical knowledge of the solar sequence, it looked somewhat similar to the holy light of the solar sequence. However, the super magic he used, fairy radiance, was far more powerful than holy light. Holy light only borrowed a trace of the sun's power, while fairy radiance collected the power of all the nearby stars. Even with his current sequence 6 faceless man's spiritual energy, his attack would be enough to severely injure a sequence 4 demigod. This is why Zangwill, one of the strongest sequence 5s, had his strongest attack purified in just a few seconds. If George hadn't intended to spare Zangwill's life, that attack would have instantly killed him. The mirror world magic he was using now was thanks to the mystical knowledge he had acquired from the primordial witch. Witch path beyonders can use the power of mirrors to travel through them, even constructing spaces within them for cover. This allowed him to quickly switch to the mirror world magic. Witch path mirror ability. Zangwill was somewhat confused. He thought the other party was on the solar path, but how could they have witch path abilities? However, he quickly put that question aside. The most important thing now was to kill the person who created the mirror space and escape. Let's join forces, or we'll all die. He turned to look at the black baby that had been completely squeezed out of Mega S's belly. At this moment, only by joining forces with the offspring of the true creator could they possibly escape. As for being punished by the true creator later, that was something they had to deal with first. Meanwhile, the black infant, no longer restrained by the saint's ashes, looked at the unfathomable George, and although furious, nodded. He desperately wanted to kill Zangwill, the mortal who dared to scheme against him and cause his premature birth, but now he had to survive. Only by surviving and regaining his power could he allow his father to enter his body, descend upon this world, kill those 3 traitors, and reclaim his power. We'll help you hold off the evil god's offspring. You kill him as soon as possible. Upon regaining consciousness, Dunn saw Zangwill about to join forces with the evil god's offspring and immediately took the quiet hair from Cohen. He would lead the Night Watch team to desperately hold off the already born evil god's offspring, buying George time to kill the mastermind behind it all. No need, however. George smiled slightly and then unleashed his second light magic, super magic, fairy law. A powerful white light instantly enveloped the entire mirror space, and Dunn and the others heard 2 miserable and unwilling cries. Compared to the radiance of the fairy, the power unleashed by fairy law at this moment was terrifyingly strong. It wasn't because the radiance of the fairy was weaker than fairy law. In fact, in terms of pure destructive power, the radiance of the fairy was stronger than fairy law. However, the radiance of the fairy mainly consumed the magic power within the body. George's spiritual energy was only sequence 6, and even with the converted energy, it was at most sequence 5. No matter how strong the radiance of the fairy was, it could at most severely injure a sequence 4. But fairy law was different. Fairy law mainly consumed the caster's life force, and magic power was secondary. With George's single universe level life force, if you were to unleash fairy law at full power, even a sequence 1 would be severely injured. Therefore, even though the offspring of the true creator had successfully descended, along with Zangwill, under the attack of the fairy law, they were instantly beaten to the point of near death, barely clinging to life. Before the white light dissipated, George took out a Russian nesting doll and cast the nesting doll sealing spell from the apprentice magician's world on the 2, sealing them inside the doll. The evil god's offspring could be used to divine the evil god and conduct magical experiments. There was no rush to kill him. Imprisoned was to be kept alive. Once he acquired the relevant memory magic, he could be used to search souls and obtain a wealth of valuable information. This guy definitely had a lot of information about him in his mind. Instant kill. When the white light dissipated and they saw Imprisoned and the evil god's offspring disappear, Dunn and the others assumed they had been instantly killed by George, their faces filled with shock. They hadn't expected this suddenly appearing helper to be so powerful. Chapter 756. You can call me Passerby. Deactivating the mirror space, they returned to the ruined Blackthorn Corporation. Thank you, sir, for killing the evil god and saving Tingen. May I ask your name? Dunn asked George cautiously. Although the other party had killed the evil god and the attackers, it didn't necessarily mean they were friendly to their church as extraordinary beings. It was best to confirm the other party's identity. George raised a hand to stop Dunn's question and went to Megas, who had lost her head and arms due to the evil god's birth, her body completely deformed. He reached out and grasped Megas's confused soul, which was leaving her body, and then cast light-based healing magic to rebuild her body, removing all contamination. He had converted not only the light magic from the fairy tale world, but also light magic from other worlds that he had modified to have healing effects. To Dunn and the others' astonishment, Megas's deformed and broken body returned to normal at a visible speed. Alright, a few days of rest should be enough for him to wake up. After finally shoving Megas's soul into her body, George turned to Dunn and smiled slightly. You can call me Passerby. Without waiting for Dunn's further questions, he vanished. What a strange name. Dunn looked confused, but seeing George disappear, he suddenly realized something. Klein, Leonard, Cohen. Did he take the saint's ashes? The three nodded simultaneously, while Klein's lips twitched slightly. Only he understood what Passerby meant. He could imagine that this perfunctory name would soon circulate among the three high-ranking members of the Church of the Goddess of the Night, the Church of the Lord of Storms, and the Church of Steam and Machinery. Meanwhile, the Goddess of the Night, in her divine realm, shared the same expression as Klein. Due to her extraordinary nature in plotting the Death God's path, she was currently quite busy and didn't constantly monitor her fellow countryman Klein, only checking on him occasionally in her spare time. Therefore, she hadn't seen Klein summon George, only witnessing the final battle. She was still wondering who this extraordinary individual with powers similar to the solar sequence and which sequence was, but when she heard George refer to himself as Passerby, she immediately knew it must be him. She was increasingly baffled by this enigmatic fellow townsman, George, whose identity she wondered if he was even from the same hometown. However, she wasn't too concerned. He hadn't shown any hostility, and besides, she was genuinely busy. Her grand plan, meticulously crafted over millennia, was about to come to a close. Shortly after George left, the Punisher and the Extraordinary of the Mechanical Heart arrived with a sealed artifact. Less than half an hour later, the high-ranking deacons of the Holy Church headquarters, aided by the flying high-ranking deacons of the Church of the Storm Lord, also arrived in Tingen. After learning the entire course of the battle, these high-ranking deacons, whose strength reached sequence 4, exchanged bewildered glances. Passerby? They had never heard of such a powerful individual. And to be able to instantly kill Imprisoned and the offspring of the evil god, this must be at least sequence 3 strength. In an instant, the name Passerby began to circulate among the high-ranking officials of the three major churches, and they began investigating his existence using various methods. They even contacted the Church of the Eternal Sun, but received no useful information. This expert, suspected to be a Sequence 3 Justice Mentor, seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Dunn, George, who had already returned to Backland, felt a faceless potion being rapidly digested as his identity as a nobody spread, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. He re-entered the mirror space and released the dying Imprisoned. After being released, Imprisoned discovered that he wasn't at the Night Watch headquarters and immediately guessed that George wasn't a member of the Church of the Night Goddess. So, his eyes lit up, and he said, "No matter who you are, we can cooperate. I was once the Archbishop of the Church of the Night Goddess and know many secrets. What's the first thing to do when you become a prisoner? Of course, it's to prove your worth, your existence, so you won't be killed and have a chance to turn the tables. As long as the other party isn't a member of the Church of the Night Goddess, it's not too late. Introduce yourself first, then introduce this sealed artifact." George beckoned, and the 0-08 sealed artifact, the Pen of Al-Sharad, fell into his hand. This guy, a Sequence 5 corpse collector, could manipulate the Night Watchers and scheme against the offspring of evil gods. He relied on this quill pen that could turn written content into reality. Therefore, compared to Intzengel, he was more interested in the quill pen. My name is Intzengel, and I was formerly the Archbishop of the Church of the Goddess of Night. This sealed artifact is called the Pen of Al-Sharad, and it's the 0-08 sealed artifact. I took it with me when I defected, to gain George's trust. Intzengel didn't lie, revealing his identity and information about the Pen of Al-Sharad. Of course, he wasn't foolish enough to tell everything. He omitted and modified some facts. It was basically 9 parts truth and 1 part falsehood, so as not to arouse George's suspicion. For example, he would describe his entire defection from the church as a desperate choice made to survive, in order to evoke George's sympathy. He would downplay the negative effects of the Al-Sharad pen, making it easier for George to suffer the backlash when using the pen later. So it possesses the extraordinary characteristics of the Dreamer's Path Sequence 1. No wonder it has such powerful strength. Even I was affected to some extent, George murmured to himself, holding the Al-Sharad pen. He hadn't investigated his older cousin Megas's matter deeply because of the influence of the Al-Sharad pen. The next step after Sequence 1 is True God, and the power it contains has already touched upon the laws. Under normal circumstances, he would naturally be able to quickly perceive this influence and eliminate it through various means. However, because he needed to avoid detection, he had suppressed all the power within him, including his mental power, which is why he was only slightly affected. It is said that sequences that are not adjacent to each other cannot be switched, otherwise, one will either go mad or die on the spot. Looking at the quill in his hand, George had some thoughts. Later, once he ascends to a higher sequence and transforms more magic, perhaps he can try to absorb the extraordinary characteristics of this Sequence 1. Some rules are useful to the extraordinary beings of this world, but they may not be useful to him, an external, single universe level powerhouse. Tell me everything valuable information you know. George put away the Al-Sharad pen and gestured for Intzengel to continue. Only by speaking can you prove your worth, otherwise, I'll end you right now. Chapter 757 The Mad Creator. I'll talk. Seeing George's forceful attitude, Intzengel feigned hesitation for a moment before yielding. He was at George's mercy. Not speaking was impossible now. But how much he said, how much he withheld, and what was true and what was false was up to him. As long as George realized his value, he wouldn't kill him easily to obtain more information and verify its worth. I know you didn't finish, and it might not all be true, but that's alright. After Intzengel finished speaking, a cold smile appeared on George's face. Because I have plenty of methods, I don't mean to offend you, I'm just trying to prove my worth. If you're willing to cooperate with me, you can gain even more. Intzengel was a man who had seen his share of storms and wasn't intimidated, instead displaying a hypocritical smile. George, however, waved his hand expressionlessly. No need. Before Intzengel could react, George had already struck him in the chest. He used the method he had previously used to treat those who had lost control to forcibly extract the extraordinary characteristics of a Sequence 5 gatekeeper from his body. You really are a Sun Sequence. Intzengel's face twisted in anger. To instantly transform from a powerful extraordinary into an ordinary person was naturally a terrible thing for him. Although as a former Sequence 5, he could quickly recover with a corresponding extraordinary trait, it still filled him with immense rage. However, he was certain of one thing: the person before him was a high-ranking Sun Sequence powerhouse. Only beings of Sun Sequence 4 or higher could extract extraordinary traits from extraordinary beings through purification. And George's speed in extracting extraordinary traits from him meant he couldn't possibly be only Sequence 4, he was either Sequence 3 or Sequence 2 angel-level powerhouse. So, despite his inner rage and distorted expression, he suppressed his anger and tried to persuade the other party. Unfortunately, George no longer wanted to listen to him and instead directly absorbed him into a Russian nesting doll, sealing him again. For George, once he acquired the relevant memory magic in a few days, he could directly perform a soul search, simple, quick, and efficient. There was no need to listen to Intzengel's nonsense. A gatekeeper's extraordinary trait, study it and then sell it to the other members of the Tarot Society. After carefully storing the gatekeeper's extraordinary trait, George released the dying offspring of the evil god. Now comes the main event. According to the information Zengwil had just given, this offspring of the evil god was actually the offspring of the true creator. The true creator wanted to descend upon this world through this offspring. And the true creator was the evil god worshipped by the Aurora Society, the most insane cult. His image was that of a hanging giant. The Aurora Society was a secretive organization that had emerged in the last 200 or 300 years, believing that the true creator created this world. He was omnipresent, existing within every living being. Therefore, all things possessed divinity, and those with sufficient divinity could become angels. Many members possessed the hangman pathway, with a high number being secret prayers and listeners. Listeners could directly hear the whispers of their corresponding hidden beings, so they often gained powerful, twisted, and unique abilities. However, correspondingly, without advancement, it's difficult to survive more than 5 years, thus all listeners are madmen. Even if they appear normal in daily life, they are inevitably hidden madmen. Even without actively using their extraordinary listening ability, they will hear more in normal environments than ordinary people and most mid to low sequence extraordinary individuals. When the sound source is close enough, they will be more affected and receive more dangerous information. This is why the major churches believe that the Aurora Society is basically made up of lunatics. Anyway, he doesn't think the so-called true creator is the creator of the world he's looking for. Frankly, that's too lowbrow. He estimates that this true creator is at most sequence 0 of the Hangman sequence. Because he was sealed outside this planet by the 7 righteous gods and the barrier, just like the evil gods who occupy various stars outside. Therefore, the idea of coming to this world through the birth of an evil god's offspring is mostly self-aggrandizement and fabrication. Just like the 7 righteous gods telling their followers that they are the eyes, arms, legs, etc., of the original creator. The last god to become a true god, the god of steam and machinery, couldn't be made up that way because he became a god too late. Actually, he couldn't understand why those evil gods, whose power was clearly greater than the 7 gods, who occupied the various stars, coveted this planet so much and wanted to enter. Was it for the souls of the humans on this planet? With their strength, even if they devoured all the human souls on this planet, it didn't seem like they would gain much power. Or was it to devour the 7 true gods? If so, it would be somewhat plausible. Divining the source of this child's power, mentioning the dying offspring of the true creator, George began to exploit the true creator through divination. Like the primordial witch, the true creator was also an evil god, and couldn't openly descend to deal with him like a true god. So he could exploit him without much restraint. Closing his eyes and entering a meditative state, George saw the image of the hanged giant in his mind, the true creator himself. Then, as expected, he received a counterattack from the true creator. Just like before, he exploited every sequence 0. Moreover, the true creator not only retaliated but also tried to corrupt and parasitize him. However, since it wasn't its true form descending, it had no effect on George. Even if its true form descended, it couldn't corrupt his soul or parasitize his body. Sequence 9, Prayer. Sequence 8, Listener. Sequence 7, Hermit. Sequence 6, Rosemaster. Sequence 5, Shepherd. Sequence 4, Black Knight. Sequence 3, Head of the Sanctuary. Sequence 2, Elder of the Foul Language. After exploiting all the knowledge of Sequence 2, George thought the true creator would stop attacking him, severing the connection to divination like the primordial witch. However, to his surprise, the true creator didn't sever the connection to divination and continued attacking him irrationally. It felt like a madman. So, naturally, he continued exploiting without hesitation. Sequence 1, Dark Angel. Sequence 0, The Hanged Man. Grisha, Ancient Sun God. Betrayal. Not just the potion formulas and related rituals and abilities of Sequence 1 and Sequence 0. Because the true creator was relentlessly attacking, making no attempt at divination defense, George continued to extract information, even uncovering some of the true creator's most hidden secrets. So that's how it is. This guy really is a madman. Chapter 758 An Unexpected Great Gain. The true creator's real name is Grisha. Like Klein, he was originally a human living in the modern world. Later, God placed him in the Chaos Sea as a means of resurrection. He emerged from the Chaos Sea in the Second Era, possessing the complete sun, the Hangman pathway, and the erroneous pathway because he was a contingency plan for God's resurrection. He appeared during the era of the old God's rule. The old gods were transformed from extraordinary beings who absorbed extraordinary characteristics. In the first era, the original creator awakened, Earth's civilization was destroyed, and God and the celestial venerable fought and both perished. A large number of extraordinary characteristics scattered, causing many ordinary beings to evolve into extraordinary beings, ultimately becoming the old gods. The old gods are mainly divided into three factions. The first is the humanoid faction, primarily formed from human mutations, such as the progenitor of vampires, the giant king, and the elf king. The second is the non-human faction, primarily formed from animal and plant mutations, such as the imaginary dragon, the king of aliens, and the progenitor of the phoenix. The third is the chaotic evil faction, intent on destroying the world, such as the king of destruction and the demon king. Among these half-mad ancient gods, there was one who wasn't mad, named the demon king for beauty, who was once a modern human. He can be understood as a zombie king who evolved to his limit and regained his memories. However, because his path was demonic, he appeared even more evil and insane than the mad ancient gods. These ancient gods treated the surviving humans as their slaves or food, slaughtering them at will or forcing them into sacrifices. Grisha, like a protagonist in a wasteland story, defeated, killed, or subjugated these ancient gods, rebuilding human civilization. He was also known as the ancient sun god, an omniscient and omnipotent god. In the Third Age, Grisha practically ruled the entire world. He possessed 5 sequence 0 pathways and controlled the Chaos Sea, becoming an old one surpassing the level of a true god. He had 8 archangel kings under his command and even calculated and published all the relevant formulas for the 22 divine pathways, greatly reducing the risk of Beyonders losing control due to indiscriminate consumption. However, he then discovered something terrifying. God was about to awaken and resurrect within him. Not wanting to be possessed by God, he had 2 children. One was named Amen, who inherited the wrong path. The other was named Adam, who inherited the uniqueness of the dreamer, nominally his son, but actually a divine avatar he conjured up. But this alone wasn't enough to escape God. So he devised another plan, to completely escape God by dying and then coming back to life. He created another avatar, Sasriel, a composite of all his negative personalities, and had it find his most loyal angel kings to form the Rose of Redemption to assassinate him. After his death, he planned to have the negative personality avatar Sasriel and the divine personality avatar Adam absorb his extraordinary characteristics. This way, he could completely escape God's possession without losing his power. Unfortunately, his plan was only half successful. After his death, his loyal angel kings betrayed him. The 3 great angel kings, Wind, White, and Wisdom, ate his corpse, divided his uniqueness, and became the Lord of Storms, the Eternal Sun, and the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. The avatar Sasriel only managed to take the Hanged Man's unique characteristic, becoming the true creator. His blood stained the seas, turning what was once Europe and Africa into cursed, sunless land, a land forsaken by the gods. Those who betrayed him fled to North America, becoming the true gods worshipped by humanity. Because Sasriel inherited both humanity and all its negative traits, lacking a complete synthesis of humanity, he went mad. Even while spreading his faith, he frequently killed his followers, unable to escape the cursed land and reach North America. Simultaneously, he vied for dominance with Adam, who inherited divinity, unable to successfully merge and regain his sanity. So, the original creator of this world has already died due to the split. Of all the knowledge gained from the true creator, the most valuable information for George was that the original creator of this world was dead. Or rather, categorized as God and the celestial venerable. However, these 2 were also gone, awaiting resurrection. What did this mean? It meant he no longer needed to be so cautious in using his power. He dared not use his own world, dared not use the power of other worlds, primarily fearing discovery and pursuit by the creator of this world. Therefore, he had always used physical power and power transformed based on the power system of this world. Now that the original creator was dead, there was no need to worry about being discovered. However, he couldn't be completely careless, as there were still 7 righteous gods watching. While he wasn't afraid of one at a time, 7 of them working together would be quite difficult to handle. These righteous gods, upon discovering his use of power from other worlds, might not know he came from another world, but they might think he was one of the evil gods from outside Earth. Therefore, unless there was a crisis, it was best to use magic that had been converted and was compatible with this world system. Moreover, The conversion process itself was also part of his research into this power system, which would help him improve himself and facilitate his later absorption of this world. Since the creator of this world had already split and died, he certainly wouldn't be polite. He wanted to acquire the uniqueness of all 22 sequences, then fuse all the source matter, and absorb and devour this entire world. However, in doing so, not only God and the Celestial Venerable, but even the will of the original creator might revive in this avatar. But he wasn't worried. As long as his other avatars devoured other worlds before he could completely absorb this world, raising their strength to a level surpassing that of the original creator, then he could directly obliterate the will of the original creator and completely acquire this world. So, he couldn't rush things before that. He steadily advanced to Sequence 0, stabilizing the troubles brought by the extraordinary sequence and preventing the Celestial Venerable from resurrecting within him. He couldn't yet handle the will of the original creator, but the Celestial Venerable's will was currently a relatively minor issue. While not completely erasing it, suppressing it forcefully was no problem. If all his clones and souls came together, completely erasing the resurrected Celestial Venerable's will wouldn't be impossible. However, it wasn't necessary for now. Even if he erased the Celestial Venerable's resurrected will within his own body, the Celestial Venerable could still resurrect within any other extraordinary being from the diviner, thief, or apprentice pathways. He could eliminate the Celestial Venerable after absorbing the uniqueness of these three paths. Furthermore, if he encountered a true God-level enemy and didn't want to be completely exposed, he could simply pull the enemy into his own world and eliminate them. True God-level beings couldn't see through his world, so they wouldn't discover his unbridled use of other worlds' power within his own. And the only one who could possibly see through his world, the original creator, was already dead. He had initially thought those evil gods were all outside Earth, but it seemed that wasn't entirely true. Many were actually within Earth, hiding to avoid the 7 great gods. Like the Primordial Witch. If the Primordial Witch dared to secretly attack him based on his divination, he could conveniently claim the unique witch title. This is truly an unexpected windfall. He had only intended to gain some knowledge of the Hangman sequence, but unexpectedly, he had acquired most of the historical secrets of the first 3 eras. No wonder the Aurora Society always clashes with the Church of the Lord of Storms, the Church of the Eternal Sun, and the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. Chapter 759 Source Castle changes hands. 2 days later, the high-ranking deacons of the sanctuary left Tingen, and everything calmed down. The common people only knew that a meteor had unexpectedly struck Tingen, damaging a house, but thankfully no one was injured. They didn't know they had almost become sacrifices to the evil god. At 2 p.m., an hour before the tarot meeting, Klein summoned George and informed him of the church's subsequent handling of the situation. George truthfully told Klein all the clues he had obtained from the true creator's divination. "I can't believe it's true." Klein was completely devastated upon learning the truth. He had already suspected something when he saw the cocoons on the gray fog, but it was just a guess. Now that it was confirmed this was Earth, and all his family and friends were dead, and he could never return, how could he not be heartbroken? Fortunately, the time that had passed allowed him to recover after a while. Since he couldn't go back, he could only try to live well here. Fortunately, he had family and friends here, so he wasn't alone. "What are your plans now?" George asked, sitting opposite Klein after he recovered. Klein calmly considered for a while. "I want to make a deal with you." His previous efforts to create the Tarot Club and advance his ranks were all aimed at finding a way home. Essentially, he wasn't a very ambitious person. He preferred a peaceful life, receiving a generous night watchman salary and dealing with some not too terrifying extraordinary events. But the arrival of the evil god's offspring made him realize that this world was full of immense danger. To protect his family and friends in this world, he needed considerable strength. But now there was a huge problem. He was the backup plan for the Celestial Venerable's resurrection. The faster his strength increased, the faster he would die, and the easier it would be for the Celestial Venerable to possess and resurrect him. To have both, he had to get rid of the Source Castle and let someone else bear the consequences. However, what was a consequence for him was an opportunity for a true powerhouse. He believed that as long as he revealed the Source Castle, countless powerful individuals would be willing to pay a huge price to take it away. Given his strength, it was highly likely he wouldn't exchange it, but rather seize it by force, and might even kill him afterward. Rather than that, he felt it was better to hand it over to his fellow countrymen. George was powerful enough, and through their interactions, He could see that George was different from him, someone unwilling to settle for a peaceful life. This way, he could avoid the risk of being possessed by the Celestial Venerable, and also gain George's help. George had helped him before because they both wanted to uncover the truth about the time travel and find a way back, and they were also from the same hometown. But now that the truth was clear, he couldn't keep bothering his fellow countrymen. Of course, if George wasn't willing to take over the Source Castle, he would find other ways to get rid of the Celestial Venerable's threat. The simplest method was to stop advancing to higher sequences. As long as he remained at a low sequence, the Celestial Venerable would never awaken within him. What kind of deal? Tell me. George saw through Klein's thoughts at a glance. This was exactly the result he wanted after telling Klein the truth. Sure enough, Klein proposed giving the Source Castle to George, hoping that George would help him in times of crisis, just like this time. He readily agreed, no problem. I'll refine the Source Castle using my methods, but I'll leave it with you for now. You can continue using the Source Castle, disguise yourself as the Fool, and use the Tarot Society to gather intelligence and improve your strength. To fully absorb the Source Castle and advance to the ancient level, one's strength must reach sequence 0 of the diviner sequence. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry to take it now, as it wouldn't significantly enhance his strength. Especially now that he wasn't worried about the original creator and could utilize his own world, which was far more useful than the Source Castle. He also understood that Klein possessing the Source Castle was a contingency plan of the Celestial Venerable, and the Goddess of Night, who frequently watched this place secretly, certainly knew. According to the true creator's memories, the Goddess of Night was likely also a modern person. If that were the case, then the answer to the third cocoon breaking open on the Source Castle would be clear. The Celestial Venerable had hung many modern souls on the Source Castle, and 3 had been released so far. Klein was one, Rosal was one, and Klein thought the last one was him, but it wasn't. If the Goddess of Night was also a modern person, then the third one was most likely the Goddess of Night. This explains why the Goddess of the Night has been secretly monitoring Klein without taking any action. Normally, if a true god were constantly watching Klein, they would surely discover that he possesses the secret of the Source Castle. Even if the Source Castle isn't the one corresponding to their own sequence, they wouldn't be unmoved by the Celestial Venerable's possession. Even if they couldn't use it themselves, they could exchange it with other true gods. However, the Goddess of the Night has made no move, only guiding Klein to join her church and become her follower, allowing her to monitor him at any time. If the Goddess of the Night was the first soul released, then it makes sense. As the Celestial Venerable's backup plan, the Goddess of the Night must know all the secrets and doesn't want to be possessed by the Celestial Venerable again, so she won't touch the Source Castle. At the same time, she doesn't want the Source Castle to fall into other people's hands, leading to the Celestial Venerable's resurrection, which is why she's kept it with Klein. His contact with Klein now has probably already alerted the Goddess of the Night. If she discovers that he has taken the Source Castle from Klein, she will immediately come down to talk to him. In truth, he felt that by impersonating a fellow townsman to contact Klein, the Goddess of the Night should have sought him out for a talk. Her continued silence suggested either she was genuinely patient or something had held her back. Therefore, he first refined the Source Castle to his own, then kept it with Klein for his use. This would create the illusion that Klein remained the owner of the Source Castle. He still needed to rely on the Church of the Goddess of the Night to obtain the potion for his advancement, so it wasn't wise to meet with the Goddess of the Night and confront her too soon. If the meeting broke down, his cooperation with the Church of the Goddess of the Night would end. Knowing that higher levels of advancement meant greater power and a greater chance of awakening the consciousness of the Celestial Venerable and the primordial Creator, he understood that it was best to advance according to the normal advancement order and rituals of this world. Even with his incredibly powerful body and soul, capable of ignoring the loss of control caused by the potion, it would still accelerate the awakening of the consciousness of the Celestial Venerable and the primordial Creator. The Celestial Venerable's consciousness was manageable, but the primordial Creator's consciousness was more problematic. So even if it's not for studying the power system of this world, one still needs to learn from the extraordinary beings of this world how to concoct and consume corresponding potions, digest them, and undergo rituals. Then, step by step, one can advance to sequence 0. Chapter 760 Behind the Fool Lies Power. I will use Taoist weapon refining techniques to refine the Source Castle. You should step out first, and come back in after the pacifier I gave you starts flashing. After letting Klein leave the Source Castle, George reached out and forcibly dragged it into his own world. Then, he waved his hands repeatedly, causing chains of rules to spread from his world, binding the Source Castle, and began the refining process. Although the Source Castle is one of the 9 Source Essences, its owner is currently only Sequence 8 Klein, and Klein has willingly offered up his Source Essence. Therefore, refining it using the rules of his world is not a difficult task for George. Once refined, he will be the true master of the Source Castle and can use its abilities. However, at this time, the Source Castle can only function like a magical artifact, but it cannot fundamentally increase his power. Only when he advances to Sequence 0 can he fuse this artifact into his body, allowing it to react miraculously with the extraordinary characteristics within him, thereby greatly increasing his strength. It's like the refined Source Castle is now just an ordinary knife, which can be used to cut people or vegetables. However, one's own power does not increase simply by wielding a sword. Upon advancing to Sequence 0, the Source Fortress transforms from an ordinary mortal sword into a magical artifact that can be integrated into the body. By infusing its inherent energy into its master's body, the master's physical body is strengthened, with significant improvements in strength, speed, and other aspects. Done, because he was in his own world, and one of his avatars had recently learned many methods for refining innate spiritual treasures from the 3 immortal maidens of the primordial era. George completely refined the Source Fortress into his own possession in less than half an hour. It was precisely because he used the refining techniques guided by the 3 immortal maidens that, at this moment, not only other true gods, but even a resurrected heavenly venerable could not take the Source Fortress from him. The only way to take the Source Fortress was to kill him. Moreover, killing only his avatar in this world was not enough. His main body and all his avatars had to be killed to refine the Source Fortress. This was because the Source Fortress had been deeply imprinted on his soul after refinement. Simply killing the avatar in this world could not destroy his soul imprint. Meanwhile, Klein, whose soul had returned, found that his connection with the Source Castle had been severed. Seeing the pacifier glowing, Klein took a few steps backward as before. At this moment, a wisp of energy from the pacifier wrapped around Klein, pulling him into the Source Castle. The pacifier was a magical artifact created by George, intended only for Klein's use, but essentially still belonging to George and under his control. George saw Klein through the pacifier and, using it as a medium, used the power of the Source Castle to pull Klein back in, just as Klein had used the power of the Source Castle to bring the Tarot Club members. With a hand seal, George touched Klein's brow, leaving a magical mark. At this moment, Klein felt his connection with the Source Castle return. However, this connection was now somewhat different from before. You used the Source Castle the same way you used it before, basically no change. The true master of the Source Castle used to be the Celestial Venerable, who, before his death, programmed the Source Castle to release his soul to complete his resurrection. Klein was one of the released souls and became the temporary master of the Source Castle. The stronger Klein became, the more he could unleash the power of the Source Castle. Once he reached Sequence 0, he could fully utilize its power. However, by then, Klein would no longer be Klein, but would have been replaced by the resurrected Celestial. Now, George forcibly refined the Source Castle, erasing the Celestial's hidden tricks, and became the true master of the Source Castle. He granted Klein the right to use the Source Castle, so Klein is still its temporary master. Moreover, because George, the true master, has opened all the permissions of the Source Castle to Klein, theoretically, the power of the Source Castle that Klein can now use is much stronger than before. This can be considered as some reward from George for Klein's voluntary offering of the Source Castle. In addition, it is also to ensure that Klein has sufficient ability to protect himself and doesn't always have to come to him for help. At 3 p.m., the Tarot meeting convened on time. However, at this time, the members of the Tarot meeting were unaware that Mr. Fool sitting above was no longer the true leader of the Tarot meeting. The true leader had been replaced by Mr. Power sitting below. The moment Audrey and Alger appeared, their gazes immediately fell upon George. Seeing his clearly adult soul, and recalling the infant state they had witnessed at the banquet, both were filled with mixed emotions. After exchanging greetings as per protocol, Alger addressed Klein, Mr. Fool, I've obtained 19 pages of Roselle's diary this time, but I can only fill in 6 pages at a time. I'll need to do it in several sessions. Good, Klein nodded, taking the manifested notes from Alger. Then Alger turned to George, Mr. Power, thank you for helping me eliminate Zeringus, but I haven't yet obtained the historical data from the earlier eras that you need. I'm willing to pay with money, extraordinary items, extraordinary materials, or any other information you require. He was currently only a low-sequence extraordinary being of the Church. How could he be qualified to access those precious documents from ancient eras? He only had the opportunity to see Roselle's notes because no one else could understand them, and the Church didn't value them. No need, Mr. Fool has already paid for you. We'll use the 19 pages of Roselle's notes you collected as the exchange. George waved his hand with a smile. He already knew most of the information about the first 3 eras through the true creator, so Alger didn't need to collect it anymore. Saying that Mr. Fool paid on your behalf was more in line with Mr. Fool's identity. It's normal for an ancient being like Mr. Fool to know information about the previous eras. Otherwise, the impoverished Klein wouldn't have been able to pay for Alger's 19 pages of Roselle's diary. Klein was now his puppet, helping him trade with the Tarot Society members under the Fool's identity, so he naturally wouldn't let Klein's identity be exposed. Moreover, Roselle's notes would be useful to him. He had obtained information about the first 3 eras from the true creator, but he knew less about what happened after the 3rd era. He could obtain that information through Roselle's notes. Furthermore, Roselle had created and recorded the complete 22 sequences of tarot cards. If he could find all the clues through the diary, that would be good. The Tarot Society was still very weak, only by nurturing them could they provide some help. Therefore, George doesn't mind investing more in the early stages. With role-playing, as long as there are enough resources, upgrading from a low sequence to a high sequence doesn't actually take long. Chapter 761 Mr. Power, Inhumanly Extravagant. I really want to know about the history of the ancient era. Audrey's face lit up with excitement upon hearing this. She considered whether to spend money to obtain some information from the Fool to broaden her knowledge. However, considering how much money she had been spending lately, and the need to exchange for Sequence 8 potion ingredients from the Hanged Man, she decided to wait. She would wait until she was an adult and could freely manage her wealth. For now, she would focus on advancing her level. Meanwhile, the son was equally eager. He wanted to know what had happened on his continent. Why had the omniscient and omnipotent creator abandoned them? Why were they living in such despair? But he restrained himself, because he needed to use all his resources to improve his strength. Otherwise, even if he knew, without sufficient power, he wouldn't be able to solve the problem or save Silver City. After Klein finished reading the 6 pages of the diary presented by Alger, the Tarot Society began its formal exchange and trading phase. As the exchange and transaction neared its end, George spoke. I possess the extraordinary traits of Sequence 7 Psychiatrist, Sequence 7 Interrogator, Sequence 7 Nightmare, Sequence 6 Wind Chosen, Sequence 5 Gatekeeper, Sequence 5 Light Priest, and Sequence 4 Black Knight. I have all the potion recipes from Sequence 9 to Sequence 2 of the Witch Sequence, all the potion recipes from Sequence 9 to Sequence 2 of the Sun Sequence, and all the potion recipes from Sequence 9 to Sequence 2 of the Hermit Path. And I possess all the potion recipes from Sequence 9 to Sequence 0 of the Hanged Man. Hearing George's words, the 3 present were stunned. They knew George was a high-sequence powerhouse and possessed considerable resources, but they hadn't expected him to be this wealthy. It wasn't just wealthy, it was incredibly wealthy. The things George mentioned were priceless. The extraordinary traits were one thing, but 3 potion recipes from Sequence 9 to Sequence 2 and 1 potion recipe that could grant godhood were absolutely enough to drive any extraordinary being of that sequence insane. At the same time, a look of surprise and delight appeared on the faces of the 3 of them. Audrey is currently preparing to advance to Sequence 8, after which she will have to worry about the potion ingredients for the Sequence 7 Psychiatrist. And among the extraordinary traits given by Mr. Power is the Sequence 7 Psychiatrist extraordinary trait. Alger, also in the Sequence 7 Navigator sequence, is also in need of the Sequence 6 Wind Chosen extraordinary trait. As for Derek Berg, he is the happiest, because he won't have to worry about potion formulas until Sequence 2. You can exchange these things for money and information on powerful cultists, preferably those in Backlund. Or you can exchange them for genuine historical data from the 4th era, information on high-sequence sealed artifacts, and golems of cult gods. If you don't have enough to trade right now but really need them, I allow you to buy on credit and pay later. Oh, and you can also use Roselle's diary. Just like this time, Mr. Fool will pay me. George spoke again. Actually, he no longer needed money. Having converted to transfiguration, he could conjure up countless amounts of money at any time. Even without transfiguration, he could go to his own world, conjure up enough money, and bring it out. The offer of payment was merely a ploy to make it easier for the Tarot Club members to obtain the items they desired to enhance their strength. The intelligence on powerful cult members was, of course, intended for killing them and exchanging them for materials for future potions at the Church of the Goddess of Night. Finding high-ranking members of the Secret Order would be even better, eliminating the need to go to the Church of the Goddess of Night and getting everything directly. The high-level sealed artifacts and evil god golems were for continuing to exploit both righteous and evil gods through divination. By the way, I also offer loan services. If you urgently need money, you can borrow from me without any interest. If you buy the intelligence I want through your own channels, I can give you a commission based on the value, on credit. Loans? No interest. And commissions? Hearing George's words, the 3 Tarot Club members were completely dumbfounded. Could such a good thing really exist? After a long pause, the 3 of them reacted. Alger, the most wary of them all, asked George, "Won't you be at a huge disadvantage?" "I am at a slight disadvantage, but I don't care. With Mr. Fool as a witness, I'm not afraid of you running up debts or not repaying them. Even if you die unexpectedly and can't pay back, it won't be a big loss for me. Besides, it's fate that you all joined the Tarot Club and became members. I'm willing to take a small loss and give a little first, and you can repay me when you've grown stronger," George explained with a smile. A thought flashed through the minds of the 3 of them simultaneously. Mr. Power is so rich, so generous, and so magnanimous. At the same time, they realized that the gap between them and Mr. Power was simply too vast. It was difficult to offer Mr. Power anything of value, which was why he was doing this. The 3 of them secretly resolved to improve their strength as quickly as possible, close the gap with Mr. Power, and repay his kindness. At this moment, Mr. Power's position in their hearts was second only to the Great Fool. "Thank you for your generosity." Having obtained what they wanted on credit from George, the 3 souls vanished above the Source Castle. The War of the 4 Emperors, death has gone mad. It seems even gods can lose control. After the 3 left, George took Rosal's diary from Klein and began reading. The 6 pages of Rosal's diary recorded a considerable amount of information about the 4th era, which was quite a small gain. Didn't Audrey say there were 2 people she was vetting? Once they've finished their vetting, bring them in directly. The Tarot Society still has too few people. After instructing Klein, George prepared to leave the Source Castle. Next, he planned to find Mr. A, who might belong to the Aurora Society, as provided by Audrey. If he was just an ordinary wild extraordinary being, he would let him go. If he was truly a messenger of the Aurora Society, he could kill him and send him to the Church of the Goddess of Night. This way, he could obtain the ritual in advance to Sequence 5. He was too lazy to go to the Misty Sea to find the mermaids. It would be a waste of time. It would be faster to deal with the cultists. Anyway, those cultists were just a menace, especially the cultists of the Aurora Society. But before he left, Klein asked somewhat awkwardly, "Could I borrow some money too?" "Don't mention borrowing. We're from the same hometown, take it." George waved his hand, conjuring a box of small goldfish with his transfiguration spell and stuffing it into Klein's hands. "I've recently discovered a Taoist method of turning lead into gold. I can give you as much money as you want. This isn't humanly extravagant." Klein took the box full of glittering gold, and upon hearing George's words, he was instantly stunned. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 762: The Hunter in the Night. That night, after his parents fell asleep, George quietly left his bed and went to the skies above the city of Backlund. Mr. A's location. Closing his eyes, George began divination. With a specific name and the general information provided by Audrey, coupled with his own life level far exceeding that of the other party, the success rate of the divination was 100%. Soon, Mr. A's image appeared in his mind, along with his current coordinates. In a flash of light, he used fire to leap and appear above an inconspicuous house in Queens. Eye of detection. A phantom eye slowly appeared, taking in the entire situation inside the house. So it's a gathering of extraordinary beings for a trade, Backlund, as the capital of Lone and the most prosperous city in the world, is home to many wild extraordinary beings. This has also given rise to numerous gatherings of extraordinary beings for trade. These gatherings are usually initiated and organized by a recognized powerful and prestigious extraordinary being. Membership is then based on introductions from acquaintances. They are held at specific times and locations each week. The main items traded are potion recipes, extraordinary materials, extraordinary items, and some intelligence. Normally, the Church and the Kingdom's extraordinary ones turn a blind eye to this. Mr. A is the initiator and organizer of a secret extraordinary ones gathering in Queens. Audrey knows of its existence because she knows and has hired 2 wild extraordinary ones who investigated Zelingus. They were participants in this gathering. They even brought Audrey to an extraordinary ones gathering once. These 2 wild extraordinary ones were also candidates Audrey recommended for joining the Tarot Society. The Hanged Man sequence, Sequence 5, Shepherd, it seems highly likely, by exploiting the true creator, he acquired all the knowledge from Sequence 9 to Sequence 0 of the Hanged Man sequence. Therefore, he immediately recognized Mr. A, who was presiding over the transaction, as the shepherd of Sequence 5 of the Hanged Man sequence. And the extraordinary ones of the Hanged Man sequence in this world are basically members of the Aurora Society, hidden madmen. Even if a wild extraordinary one accidentally enters this sequence, Sequence 9 is fine, but by Sequence 8, they will inevitably be corrupted by the true creator and join the Aurora Society. This is why the true creator, trapped in the Forsaken Land and unable to escape, having lost most of his sanity and frequently killing his followers, still managed to establish the Aurora Society on this continent. And the Aurora Society isn't a small organization, it's the top-tier cult that gives the 7 great churches the biggest headache. Other cults, like the Ancient Secret Order, might have their extraordinary traits from the diviner sequence scattered, allowing others to become extraordinary individuals within that sequence, but they might not necessarily join the secret order. However, the Hanged Man sequence of the Aurora Society, according to the law of conservation of extraordinary traits, will not decrease in number no matter how many are killed. This is because once someone obtains the sequence, advances to Sequence 8, and is influenced by the true creator, they will join. To completely eliminate the Aurora Society, either the true creator must be eliminated, or all extraordinary traits from the Hanged Man sequence must be collected. This would prevent anyone from becoming an extraordinary individual within the Hanged Man sequence. Therefore, Mr. A, who has reached Sequence 5, Shepherd, of the Hanged Man sequence, is 99% likely one of the Aurora Society's messengers. Just to be safe, let's double-check. George didn't immediately kill, but instead appeared in the hall of the house below in a flash of light. Mr. A and the group of wild extraordinary individuals who were overseeing the transaction were stunned when they saw the baby suddenly appear in the hall. "Are you Mr. A?" George ignored the stunned crowd and asked Mr. A, who was wearing a mask. Mr. A narrowed his eyes. "I am." "What do you want?" "I suspect you are a messenger of the Aurora Society. Come with me to the church." George raised his little hand and pointed at Mr. A emotionlessly. "What?" "Mr. A is a messenger of the Aurora Society." The wild extraordinary individuals gathered below immediately erupted in chaos. If the sudden appearance of a talking baby had only left them somewhat stunned, then learning that Mr. A was a messenger of the Aurora Society was truly terrifying. The former at most made them feel a little strange, but the latter could potentially cost them their lives. Any extraordinary individual with a little knowledge knew how ruthless and insane the Aurora Society was. The messengers inside are all lunatics and psychopaths, frequently committing massacres. If Mr. A is truly a messenger of the Aurora Society, then it's entirely possible that one day he will go mad and kill them all. People of the church, it seems you've been discovered. Sorry, but I'll have to let your soul roam free. Realizing his identity was exposed, Mr. A didn't argue, his face instantly contorting into a crazed expression as he attacked George. George immediately felt a spiritual force enveloping his body, trying to pull him into a dream. It was the ability of Nightmare, a Sequence 7 of the Dark sequence. But this ability clearly had no effect on him. Seeing that Nightmare was useless, Mr. A swiftly conjured a blazing spear wreathed in blue flames and shot it towards him. The Shepherd, a Sequence 5 of the Hanged Man sequence, possesses the ability to transform into shadows to bind enemies and into flesh to corrode them. With a powerful physique, he can use considerable flesh magic, freely control his flesh regeneration, and has extremely high survivability. He can also tear off a piece of his flesh to create a flesh bomb, with immense power. But that's not its most powerful aspect. Its greatest strength lies in its hurting ability, capable of hurting the souls of up to 7 extraordinary beings. It can switch to a different soul each time, using the extraordinary ability of the one it possesses. Mr. A just used the nightmare ability first, and now this flaming spear is from the Abyss sequence, one of the abilities of a Sequence 6 demon. Flame. Seeing the incoming burst of flames, George neither dodged nor evaded, but instead opened his mouth and actually sucked the flaming spear into his stomach. Eaten. The wild extraordinary beings who hadn't had time to escape and Mr. A both widened their eyes in disbelief. Here's a bigger one for you. George opened his mouth, and a flaming spear 10 times thicker formed, shooting towards Mr. A at an even faster speed. The magician also possessed fire abilities. He had previously studied and converted fire magic the most. Distortion. Mr. A, seeing such a thick flaming spear, broke out in a cold sweat. Even with his mastery of flesh magic, being hit by such a thick flaming spear would mean certain death. So he immediately switched the soul of a Sequence 6 corrupted baron from the Black Emperor sequence and used his distortion ability to forcibly deflect the direction of the flaming spear. Chapter 763 The Terrifying Power of High Sequences. I'll remember you. After deflecting the attack of the flaming spear, Mr. A didn't continue fighting. Instead, he switched to the flight ability of the Wind Chosen and tried to escape through the window. The Aurora Society members were all madmen, but that didn't mean they were fools. This strange infant in front of him was clearly a high-sequence powerhouse, easily breaking through his attack. Continuing to fight wouldn't give him much of a chance. Even if he could win, judging from the other party's words, he was a master of the church, and their reinforcements might arrive soon. So, having failed to kill his opponent after 2 moves, he should escape immediately. Unfortunately, George wasn't about to let him escape. In a flash of fire, he appeared beside Mr. A. Looks like you're courting death. Seeing George suddenly blocking his way, Mr. A was not surprised but delighted. His specialty was flesh magic, and the other party was so close to him. Even if the opponent's sequence was 1 level higher, it was still a sure way to die. In battle, a higher sequence doesn't necessarily guarantee victory. It's common for a lower sequence extraordinary to kill a higher sequence extraordinary. Different sequences have different abilities, some excel in combat, others not. The shepherd is extremely skilled in combat, especially close quarters fighting. 1 wrong move and his flesh and blood will penetrate your body, and no matter how strong you are, you will be breached from within. Switching to the soul of the strongest Sequence 5 Pain Witch, activating the negative disease infection. Mr. A's body instantly transformed into a mass of flesh and blood, enveloping George's body. The Sequence 5 disease infection is enough to drastically reduce the opponent's bodily functions. Once he enters the opponent's body and causes further destruction, his physical body can be disintegrated on the spot in minutes. If George were only a Sequence 4 demigod, he might actually perish on the spot after Mr. A's actions. But he is not. He simply snapped his fingers, and a giant blue fire dragon instantly formed. The dragon opened its huge mouth and swallowed Mr. A's flesh and blood in 1 gulp. As for the so-called disease infection, George simply ignored it. Not to mention the Sequence 5 Pain Witch's disease infection, even the Sequence 0 Witch's disease infection wouldn't make a body of his level sick. Scorched by the fire dragon formed from fiery blaze, Mr. A immediately let out a shrill scream, forced to shed his flesh and blood form and transform into a shadow to try and escape. Shadow. George activated the shadow magic from the shadow card, his shadow immediately extending outwards, transforming into a large hand that tightly bound Mr. A. Having acquired the occult knowledge of all the sequences of the Hanged Man from the true creator, he could naturally use the shadow abilities within the Hanged Man sequence to convert corresponding shadow magic. As for others questioning why an extraordinary being of the diviner sequence could use shadow magic, that was naturally because he possessed the crawling hunger artifact. Now, any converted magic he used, as long as it resembled the abilities of certain sequences, could be explained as using crawling hunger to nurture the corresponding soul. Bomb. Forced back into human form, Mr. A tore off one of his right arms, about to unleash a powerful flesh bomb. Although this move would severely damage him, he couldn't afford to worry about that at this moment. The strange infant opposite him was far stronger than him, otherwise, it couldn't have so easily neutralized all his attacks. He felt that if the other party hadn't intended to capture him alive, he probably wouldn't have been able to withstand a single blow. However, Just as he tore off his right arm, George appeared before him and slapped him on the head. This slap directly expelled the grazing soul within him and also unleashed his extraordinary characteristics. In the blink of an eye, he became an ordinary person. How is this possible? Mr. A's eyes showed disbelief, unable to believe that he, a dignified Sequence 5, had lost his extraordinary characteristics so easily. Now, he couldn't even commit suicide, let alone escape. Retract. George took out a Russian nesting doll and sealed Mr. A's grazing soul, collecting Mr. A's extraordinary characteristics and many high-end extraordinary materials. George then carried Mr. A and vanished in a flame. The entire process, which seemed to have taken several moves, actually lasted less than 5 seconds. The wild extraordinary individuals had just gotten up and hadn't even had a chance to jump away when it was already over. They stared at the vanishing flame, their faces filled with astonishment. Who is that baby? It's terrifying. It captured the Aurora Society's messenger in just a few seconds. At the same time, they were also filled with relief. On one hand, they were relieved that Mr. A had been captured, otherwise, they might have all been taken away by the Aurora Society one day, transformed into extraordinary abilities. On the other hand, they were relieved that the baby that captured Mr. A hadn't captured them, the wild extraordinary abilities. Otherwise, they might have spent the rest of their lives in the church's dungeons. Is this what high-sequence powerhouses battles are like? It's terrifying. Yes, it's my first time seeing this too. Luckily, I've already exchanged for the potion formula from the Sequence 8 sheriff. The two people talking were named Hugh and Furs. They were the extraordinary abilities that Audrey had hired to search for Zalingas's whereabouts, and they were also the people Audrey had recommended to join the Tarot Society. Because they were almost killed by Zalingas, even though they hadn't completed the mission, Audrey compensated them with £800 each. As soon as they received the money, they came to the party that evening, hoping to exchange it for their next potion formula. They happened to stumble upon George capturing Mr. A, witnessing the battle of high-sequence powerhouses. Meanwhile, George used his fire leap to directly reach the Church of the Goddess of Night, finding Senior Deacon Chris. Mr. A, the messenger of the Aurora Society, a Sequence 5 shepherd, is enough to exchange for the advancement ceremony, right? Unlike rescuing out-of-control individuals, George would return the out-of-control individual's extraordinary characteristics to the church. In this kind of hunting mission, everything obtained belongs to George, including the extraordinary characteristics. The church only needs the hunted target. Living is best, a dead corpse is acceptable, and even without a corpse, as long as it's confirmed that George hunted the target, it's fine. Of course, Chris's face lit up with surprise upon hearing this. Sequence 5 cultists are all seasoned veterans. Unless they have intelligence and carefully lay an ambush, they are already very difficult to capture. Especially in a large city like Rune, cultists entering are like a drop of water into the ocean. As long as they don't cause trouble and attract the attention of the church's extraordinary members, they are very safe. George can capture a Sequence 5 cultist, and a cultist from the highly destructive Aurora Society at that. How could he not be happy? Knowing that the Aurora Society cult members, especially those at Sequence 5, were lurking in Rune, they couldn't possibly be innocent. They were definitely plotting something. If George captured this cult member alive, they could prevent the conspiracy from happening. As for how George found Mr. A, he wouldn't ask. Everyone has their own secrets. Chapter 764 Mermaid in Sequence 5. Once you've digested the potion, you can apply for advancement anytime. We'll send a mermaid over, Christian said to George after having Mr. A, who had become an ordinary human, taken away for interrogation. George smiled. Then you can apply now. I've already digested the potion. What? Christian's eyes widened in disbelief. If he remembered correctly, George had only advanced to Sequence 6 Faceless Man after killing Zalingas and extracting the Faceless Man's characteristics from the wriggling hunger. And that was less than a month ago. Even the most talented extraordinary one needs several months to digest a potion, especially the higher the sequence, the more difficult it is to digest. Many high-sequence powerhouses, especially those in the church, remain stuck in their current sequence because they are digesting potions. Some have been digesting them for over 10 or 20 years and still haven't succeeded. There's nothing I can do. Maybe I'm just too talented, George shrugged, while Christian's lips twitched slightly. He himself had been stuck at Sequence 6 for a full 3 years before advancing to Sequence 5, and he had been stuck at sequence 5 for 5 years. That was already considered a genius in the church. Indeed, comparisons are odious. George was still an infant, at sequence 7, yet he could already easily defeat him in sequence 4's radar. Alright, I'll write the application now, and the mermaid will be transported over tomorrow night. No problem. George vanished in a burst of flame. Not long after George disappeared, a night watchman approached Christian with a grave expression and reported, "Mr. is dead. He seems to be under some kind of curse. Revealing any secret will result in death due to the curse. It's not your fault. I was careless." Christian frowned. He hadn't expected that sequence 5's Mr. A would possess such a hidden and advanced curse. This also meant that the Aurora Society's schemes in Rune were far more dangerous than he had imagined. Report this to the Archbishop. Back in his room, George began to tally his spoils. Besides the extraordinary characteristics extracted from Mr. A, he also obtained the extraordinary characteristics of several souls that Mr. A had herded. A unique characteristic of the Black Emperor sequence 6, the Corrupted Baron. One extraordinary trait from the Abyss Path sequence 6 Demon. One extraordinary trait from the Gate Path sequence 6 Recorder. One extraordinary trait from the Witch Path sequence 5 Pain Witch. One extraordinary trait from the Storm Path sequence 6 Wind Favorite. One extraordinary trait from the Dark Path sequence 6 Soul Soother. One extraordinary trait from the Moon Path sequence 6 Potions Professor. A total of 7 extraordinary traits from different sequences, which is exactly the limit of the sequence 5 Shepherd Grazing sequence. If he hadn't encountered a powerful opponent, even a sequence 4 demigod wouldn't have been able to capture him. I'll study them first, and then give them to the members of the Tarot Society. After making the decision, George separated the extraordinary traits from the 7 souls, and then took the 7 souls and the previously sealed Zangwil into his own world. Since the final creator was dead, he no longer needed to worry about using his own world. In his own world, he could effectively prevent the gods of this world from spying on him. And he could freely use the magic of other worlds. Soul search. One after another, George quickly used memory magic to search through the souls of all 8 people. The 6 pathways, Black Emperor, Abyss, Gate, Storm, Darkness, and Moon, along with all the potion recipes and corresponding abilities from sequence 9 to sequence 6, as well as occult knowledge, flooded into his mind. As for the Witch sequence, he already possessed all the knowledge up to sequence 2 from the Primordial Witch, so he didn't need it. Therefore, he hadn't searched Mr. A's soul before. He already had all the knowledge of Mr. A's Hangman sequence, even more than Mr. A himself. As for whether the Aurora Society might have some kind of conspiracy with Rune, that was the Church of the Dark Goddess's business, and he had no interest in knowing. If the Aurora Society really caused trouble and the Church of the Dark Goddess found him, he could conveniently gain credit and exchange it for potion recipes. Besides the knowledge of several sequences, George also gained a lot of common sense from these souls. Most importantly, he obtained the names of many high-sequence cultists. Once he converted his search magic and combined it with divination, he could quickly find these cultists and exchange them all for the remaining sequence potion recipes and potion ingredients. The following night, George returned to the Church of the Night Goddess. Christian led George to the pond in the church's backyard. On a large rock in the center of the pond, a mermaid was singing. Her song possessed a unique allure, captivating and irresistibly drawing people in. Of course, it had no effect on George. Seemingly hearing the noise, she stopped singing and turned around. Her head was indistinguishable from a human woman's, her features pure yet alluring. Judging by her head alone, she was undoubtedly a great beauty. Her chest was high and swollen, covered in dark red scales, and her lower body was a large fish tail, exuding an unusual beauty. Unfortunately, when she opened her mouth, revealing shark-like fangs and disgusting slime, all beauty was ruined. Ultimately, the mermaids of this world were nothing more than monsters mutated by extraordinary characteristics. Not the mermaids of fairy tales. At least prettier than the mermaid of the Black Lake, George couldn't help but remark upon seeing her. Speaking of ugliness, the mermaids in the Black Lake at Hogwarts Castle are truly ugly. At least the mermaids in this world are quite beautiful when they don't open their mouths. You can take the potion now. Crystal activated his Night Watch ability, pulling the mermaid into a dream and guiding her to sing again. George also took out the potion Crystal had given him to advance to sequence 5 and swallowed it whole. As the potion combined with his extraordinary abilities, he quickly advanced to sequence 5, the Mystic Master. He also understood why the Mystic Master's sequence required a mermaid song as a ritual for advancing to sequence 5. The Mystic Master's new ability was to control enemies through spirit threads, turning them into puppets. Just like the puppet of Antigonus, the 2-049 seal used by the Night Watch. Therefore, during advancement, the Extraordinary's body would become stiff, requiring the allure of the mermaid song to gradually regain control. Actually, it doesn't necessarily have to be the mermaid song. Any method that prevents his body from being affected by the spirit threads will do. Like George, his physical body is too strong, the mermaid song can't seduce him, and the spirit threads can't stiffen his body either. So, whether the ritual is there or not makes no difference. Just consider it an experience. George isn't too concerned about the completely useless advancement ritual obtained by exchanging a sequence 5 cultist. Anyway, catching a sequence 5 cultist is a piece of cake for him. It doesn't take much effort. Originally, without any ritual, or even by directly consuming the Extraordinary's characteristics, he could have advanced simply because of his powerful body. Going through all this was just for the experience, to fully understand this sequence and reduce the possibility of the celestial consciousness resurfacing. Chapter 765, The Puppet Master and Mr. Door. Alright, after successfully advancing, George reminded Creste beside him. Creste stopped using his ability to induce the mermaid to sing, staring at George with wide eyes, so fast, from start to finish, it was less than 5 seconds, and the mermaid hadn't even finished a single line of her song. Even for a genius among geniuses, advancing requires time to stabilize the new extraordinary characteristics. Moreover, the process of advancing by taking a potion carries a considerable risk of failure, even with complete digestion of the potion, a full advancement ceremony, and all preparations. The higher the sequence, the easier it is to lose control during the advancement. Even among the Church's extraordinary individuals, who face the lowest risk, many have failed to advance from sequence 6 to sequence 5. He wasn't just here to use his ability to make the mermaid sing to assist George's advancement, he was also there to take immediate action should George fail and lose control. Not only him, but given the power George had displayed in Tingeon City, there were also 4 high-ranking deacons around with sealed artifacts on standby. Even the Archbishop was watching George's advancement closely. I remember Zangwill, the one who plotted to bring forth the true offspring of the Creator in Tingeon City. He was originally a bishop of the Church. He failed to advance to sequence 4 and almost lost control. He was barely saved, but he was barely clinging to life. In order to survive, Zangwill wanted to jump to the Night Path, but at that time, the Church did not have any extra sequence Night Path extraordinary characteristics, nor could it use the Saint's Ashes. Without the Saint's Ashes, there would be no suppression in various places. So they refused Zangwill's request. Zangwill hated the Church for not helping him, so he absconded with a 0-08 sealed artifacts, causing great losses to the Church. However, the Church treated George's advancement with such great solemnity, but the other party treated it as if it were nothing. To be honest, if he hadn't seen George drink the potion with his own eyes, he would have doubted that the other party had not advanced at all. I didn't expect the advancement to be so simple either, George explained with a smile. He truly hadn't expected it to be so simple. He'd thought that since a ritual was required, advancing to sequence 5 would likely involve some twists and turns. Simple, Creste's lips twitched involuntarily. How many sequence 6 members of the Church, fearing loss of control, even hesitated to attempt advancement until retirement or death? His own advancement hadn't been smooth either. He'd only succeeded thanks to his strong will and faith in the goddess. Thank you for assisting my advancement. If there's nothing else, I'll head back now. Having successfully advanced, George greeted Creste and planned to use his Flame Leap ability to return home and slowly study his new abilities. However, Creste stopped him. It's like this, the Mr. A you helped us capture last time had a special curse on him, and he died as soon as we interrogated him. So if you have time after your advancement, could you keep an eye out for other Aurora Society envoys hiding in Backlund? They might be plotting something detrimental to Backlund. If you can figure out the Aurora Society's conspiracy, you can use it to exchange for a sequence 4 trickster's potion formula. The Church of the Night Goddess is indeed powerful, but to deal with the supernatural events occurring in various cities throughout the Kingdom of Rune, it's impossible for them all to stay in Backlund. They don't yet know what the Aurora Society's conspiracy is or how dangerous it is, so they can't spare too many people. Fortunately, George has advanced to Sequence 5 and even defeated 2 Sequence 4 warriors working together in Sequence 6. Having him help investigate is perfect. Moreover, the Archbishop believes that George might also possess some intelligence network of his own. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been such a coincidence that he captured Mr. A. So the 4th sequence of this sequence is called the Trickster. George didn't refuse, but nodded without hesitation. No problem, I'll keep an eye out for him. This was certainly not a difficult task. If the church hadn't said that the only way to deal with this was by rescuing out of control individuals and capturing cultists, he would have already searched Mr. A's memories. Anyway, as long as the Aurora Society had a conspiracy, now that Mr. A was dead, they would definitely send new ones. He could just capture them and search their souls then. Snap! With a snap of his fingers, George turned into a ball of flame and disappeared from the church. Back home, he began to study his abilities as a Sequence 5 puppet master, and how to use the potion digestion technique to advance to Sequence 4. The puppet master's ability was to greatly enhance the faceless man's abilities, while also acquiring the spiritual threads that could turn enemies into puppets. At first, he could only control one puppet, with the initial conversion taking 20 seconds and complete control taking 5 minutes. As the potion was digested, it would gradually strengthen. When the potion was completely digested, he could control 3 puppets simultaneously. Initial control took 5 seconds, and complete control took 1.5 minutes. However, this applies to normal puppeteers, not George. The spirit thread, simply put, is an extension and application of mental power. The stronger the mental power, the more puppets one can control, and the faster the control. Normal puppeteers have limited mental power, so they can only achieve so much. Only through continuous advancement and increasing mental power can they control more puppets more quickly. And how strong is George's mental power? Much stronger than a true god. This means that in terms of the speed and number of puppets he controls, he is already stronger than Sequence 0 of the Diviner sequence. And this is in a normal state. If you were to combine the spirits of his clone and main body, he might be able to directly transform a true god into his puppet. Now that he knows the original creator is dead, he no longer needs to hide his mental power. After understanding all the abilities of a puppeteer, the next step is how to play the role of digesting the potion. Based on his deduction, it should involve transforming and controlling a puppet without letting others discover it. The stronger or more numerous the controlled puppets are, and the fewer flaws appear, the faster the potion is digested. That's easy. George wasn't worried at all about the puppet master's potion digestion. With his strength, transforming a superhuman stronger than Sequence 5 was a piece of cake. As for weaknesses, he could simply pull the transformed puppet into his own world and read all its memories. That way, there wouldn't be any flaws. Plus, his mental power was strong enough that he could control the puppet over a very large range, without even leaving the planet. A normal puppet master, after fully digesting the potion, wouldn't be able to control their puppet more than 150 meters away. And George's current limit for controlling his puppet, well, as long as he didn't leave this planet, it wouldn't be a problem. So, who should we choose as the puppet to digest the potion? Chapter 766 The Hidden Blasphemy Card. Given George's temperament, finding a suitable puppet wasn't easy. First, the puppet needed to be strong, Sequence 4, preferably Sequence 3, so he could digest the potion quickly. He might only need a few days to complete the role. Second, this person shouldn't be someone who frequently commits rape, kidnapping, or constant killing. Otherwise, to conform to the rules of the role and prevent the puppet from revealing any flaws, he would have to control the puppet to act according to its original nature. That would somewhat violate his own moral principles, but he had other options and didn't want to sacrifice his own conscience. Third, this person should ideally be someone who deserved to die, so there would be no psychological burden in transforming them into a puppet. Because once transformed into a puppet, it meant death. However, if he really wanted to bring them back to life, it wasn't impossible. He still needed to find someone who met all 3 conditions. I'll walk around Backland more these nights and see if I can find a suitable one. Backland was, after all, the capital of Lone, the most prosperous city in the world, and there were many high-sequence powerhouses there. George believed he should be able to find a suitable candidate in a few days. Finally, there was the advancement ceremony after digesting the potion. All sequences reaching Sequence 6 require a ritual to assist in advancement. Just like when he, the faceless man, advanced to master of the puppetry, he needed to use the song of a mermaid. The mermaid's song was the ritual for advancement. The advancement from Sequence 5 Master of the Puppetry to Sequence 4 Trickster also requires a ritual, relying on one's own power and planning, in front of a large audience, directing a grand drama to murder a demigod or an equivalent supernatural being. At the end of the drama, consuming a magic potion allows advancement to Sequence 4. This ritual was very simple for George. Killing a Sequence 4 demigod was nothing more than a slap to true god. Having just finished organizing the information about the master of the puppetry, George sensed a summons from Klein. His soul left his body and entered the Source Castle. "What is it? I've brought both of the two recommended by Miss Justice into the Tarot Club, but one of them is a bit special." Klein quickly recounted the events of the past 2 days. It turned out that after the last tarot meeting, Audrey had secretly placed the prayer to the Fool in the book Hugh and Furs borrowed. Hugh, upon unexpectedly discovering the prayer, read a passage, which Klein, the temporary head steward of Beacon Castle, overheard. Following George's previous instructions, Klein pulled Hugh into the tarot meeting. Initially, Hugh was naturally quite frightened, but after learning about the tarot meeting, he accepted it with trepidation. Later, Hugh told Furs about the tarot meeting, but the unsuspecting Furs didn't want to join the tarot meeting, which was fraught with unknown dangers, so she didn't recite the prayer. However, on this night of the red moon, influenced by the full moon's whispers, Furs began reciting the prayer and was pulled into the tarot meeting by Klein. Her request is to resolve the full moon's whispers, and you think those whispers might originate from that Mr. Dorr in Roselle's notes. After hearing Klein's words, George immediately understood why Klein had sought him out. Klein knew he could use divination to exploit the evil god, and that Mr. Dorr was very likely the First Order Angel King. He could most likely use Furs to divine about Mr. Dorr, thereby gaining knowledge about the Dorr sequence. "I understand. I'll talk to her alone at the next tarot meeting." He could use sealing magic to solve Furs's full moon ramblings, and the reward would be to use her to contact Mr. Dorr. Klein was right, he could indeed use Furs to fleece Mr. Dorr. Moreover, compared to evil gods and righteous gods, the mere King of Angels didn't even have the ability to actively prevent him from fleecing. He could completely extract all of the other party's knowledge. At this moment, he couldn't help but admire Klein's temporary head butler. He was smart and capable, saving him a lot of trouble. And Klein's enthusiasm for work was undoubtedly related to the box of gold bars he had given him. The next day, because it was the weekend, Jack didn't go to work and planned to take his wife and children to explore Backland. So, after George finished nursing in the morning, he was carried by his parents and maids to a carriage and headed to one of Backland's most famous attractions. The Kingdom Museum's most captivating exhibit is dedicated to Emperor Rosal the Great. George is quite interested in it. The Rosal exhibition undoubtedly contains many of his diaries, offering valuable information about the 4th century. In fact, he's quite intrigued by Rosal himself. His diaries reveal that before being taken into the Source Castle, he was a typical mature youth, likely having watched numerous films, anime, and read novels. If Rosal were alive, he might be able to glean information about potential future alternate worlds from his memories. After absorbing that world, he could perhaps attempt to resurrect it and extract intelligence from it. However, once he reaches that world, he can directly enter the River of Time, traveling to the pre-destruction modern world to gather relevant information. West End, 2 Kings Road, Kingdom Museum. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the area showcasing Emperor Rosel's everyday items. Look, there's the pajamas he wore with the straw hat boy printed on them, that's the glowing sword he made himself, and that's the toilet he used. That was the first flush toilet in the modern sense. The guide, hired by Jack and his wife, led the family through the Emperor Rosal exhibit, introducing everything with practiced ease. George's gaze, however, was fixed on a bookmark tucked inside. He had already sensed its unusual nature through his powerful mental abilities. Although the bookmark was concealed by a strange and extraordinary power, that concealment, while capable of deceiving the high-sequence individuals of this world, couldn't fool him. Could the Black Emperor sequence desecration card that Rosal mentioned be hidden inside this bookmark? Rosal had previously written in his diary that he had learned the potion recipes for all sequences by examining the second desecration tablet. In his later years, he used his abilities to create 22 desecration cards and concealed them as various objects. One of these, the Black Emperor card, had been transformed into an ordinary bookmark. We'll know when we come back tonight. Right now, it's just a remote observation using mental power, so we can't be completely certain yet. We'll know for sure once we come over tonight. get our hands on the bookmarks, and examine them ourselves. After visiting Russell's museum, George lost interest and pretended to sleep with his eyes closed, actually studying the acquired knowledge. The Bartons, however, saw this as perfectly normal. Babies naturally like to sleep. Chapter 767 The Witch is really good. It was midnight. George paused his research, transforming into the form of the passerby who had previously resolved the evil god incident intention, vanishing in a burst of flame. This time, he was going to steal bookmarks from the Kingdom Museum guarded by the god of steam and machines, so naturally he couldn't use the identity of Baby George. Eye of Exploration, a phantom eye appeared above the Kingdom Museum, taking in everything inside. The effect of this sealing artifact is somewhat similar to Marauder's map. Inside the Kingdom Museum, besides some ordinary security personnel, there were also many Beyonders of the Machine Heart. They used a sealing artifact made of building blocks, causing all living and non-living things entering the museum to appear as small dots in the block room. However, this was not difficult for George. Sleep, a sleep card appeared before George's eyes, then transformed into a playful young lady, quickly circling the museum. All the ordinary security personnel and Beyonders of the Machine Heart rolled their eyes and fell into deep sleep. With the sequence properties of the Dark Path, George spent his day converting the George card sleep into a card with a similar effect. Like the George card he gave to Lucia, his sleep card combined the advantages of all sleep-related magic from around the world. Therefore, its effect was much stronger than the sleep type of the Clow cards, and even the Beyonders of the Mechanical Hearts could not resist it. This was mainly because the Beyonders of the Mechanical Hearts guarding the museum were generally of average strength, with the highest being only sequence 6. If it were a Beyonder of sequence 4 or higher, the effect would not be as good. Once they reacted, the higher sequence Beyonders had their own ways to resist the erosion of sleep and launch a counterattack. Openly entering the Kingdom Museum, ignoring the snoring guards, George grabbed a blasphemous card that had turned into an ordinary bookmark. But at that moment, the entire hall was suddenly filled with the eerie cry of an infant. Immediately afterward, a thin black slit opened in the ceiling, revealing a bloodshot eyeball. After that, more and more black slits appeared, and more eyeballs opened, densely packed, coldly and mercilessly staring at Klein. As those eyeballs appeared and gazed upon him, everything around seemed to freeze. A high-sequence powerhouse from the Hermit Path, George looked at the face that appeared above him, a hint of surprise in his eyes. He had assumed the alert fluctuations came from a high-sequence powerhouse from the Church of Steam and Machines, but it turned out to be from the Hermit Path. He had exploited the hidden sages before and knew the Hermit Path well, so he wouldn't be mistaken. Judging by this, it should be a Sequence 3 Prophecy Master. Why did you only take this bookmark? A figure appeared before George across the spirit realm, asking him in a soft but emotionless voice. George looked at the girl in front of him, a woman wearing a lace floral bow-tie blouse, a knee-length gray skirt, and tall leather boots, with a black veiled hat, and blinked. Because there's a blasphemous card in this bookmark. How do you know there's a blasphemous card in this bookmark? The girl's eyes widened in surprise, and her tone became serious. This is my secret, there's no need to tell you. George, however, stored the bookmark in his own world, forcibly dispelling its disguise using the laws of that world, restoring it to its original state, and then took it out again. So it's a Black Emperor card. His expression was somewhat regretful. He had hoped that the blasphemous card he found this time was from the Diviner sequence. The blasphemous card, now in its original form, depicted Emperor Roselle sitting on his jeweled throne. Inside were all the potion recipes and related knowledge from Sequence 9 Lawyer to Sequence 0 Black Emperor. Of course, it also contains some of the unique powers of the Black Emperor sequence. I'm willing to pay the corresponding price to trade this secret. Seeing that George had casually erased the hidden power left by her father on the Black Emperor card, a solemn look appeared in the girl's eyes. Indeed, she was none other than Roselle's eldest daughter, the former Princess of Intis, the creator of the extraordinary organization Element Dawn, Bernadette Gustave. She had always felt that her father had not truly died, so she had been searching for clues about him for many years. She knew that among the bookmarks her father left in the museum, there was a blasphemous card, but she didn't know which bookmark it was. That's why she specially marked each bookmark. Once someone touches it, she'll come to check. This mysterious person immediately locked onto the disguised blasphemous card upon appearing, clearly having obtained a concrete clue. She wanted to know how the other party obtained the clue, and whether it was related to her father. Normally, if the other party wasn't strong enough, she could have acted directly. But seeing how the other party casually erased the power of her father's hidden blasphemous card, she knew the other party's strength might not be weaker than hers. That was the power her father left behind before jumping to the Black Emperor sequence, when he was a Hermit sequence first-ranked knowledge emperor. Even before she knew the way to remove it, she couldn't forcibly remove it with her strength. You don't want this card, but want to trade this secret. Interesting. George looked the girl up and down, finding her overall attire quite strange. It bore the marks of modern civilization, yet also the style of this era, so a thought struck him. Are you Rosal's eldest daughter, Bernadette Gustave? Yes, that's me. Bernadette didn't deny it, given the other party's strength. Recognizing her was understandable. George thought for a moment and smiled. Since you're Rosal's daughter, I can tell you for free. Because I can read Rosal's diary, and it contains entries about him making blasphemous playing cards. Since she's Rosal's daughter, she must have quite a few of Rosal's diaries. He only needs to reveal that he can read them, and she'll willingly hand them over. You can read my father's diary. Bernadette's body stiffened, and a hint of surprise appeared on her face. If the other person could truly read her father's diary, then she would know what really happened to her father back then, and whether he was truly dead. George reached out and grabbed all of Russell's diaries from the museum, which flew into his hands. He began to read aloud. May 8th, my foolish diplomats, I wish I could drown them in the toilet. June 20th, my beloved angel Bernadette chose the hermit path. As her father, I must protect her and ensure her extraordinary journey is smooth sailing. July 10th. Lady Judith actually brought her daughter today. How exciting. August 16th, a year later, the witch's taste is truly wonderful. Chapter 768 I'll smash your dog head. Alright, no need to read any more, I believe you. Bernadette interrupted George's reading, her lips twitching slightly. She finally understood why her father hadn't taught her the special script recorded in his diary. To be honest, she was initially touched when her father mentioned in his diary that she was his most beloved daughter, but that feeling vanished the next second. She understood that given the prevailing atmosphere in Intis back then, her father couldn't possibly be entirely pure, which was understandable. But, a witch, twice at that. Father, you're two. At her level, she naturally knew the general outline of the witch pathways, knowing that almost all witches were transformed men. I know you're looking for my father's diary to collect the blasphemous cards. I have many of my father's diaries. I don't need the blasphemous cards, you just need to tell me about what happened to my father in his later years. You think your father isn't dead? George immediately guessed Bernadette's true purpose. But if he really succeeded in advancing, it's quite possible. He flipped a Black Emperor card to the section about the sequence 0 Black Emperor. The Black Emperor's ascension ceremony involves establishing his own country, creating a set of unconventional rules, and secretly building 9 pyramid-like mausoleums to control the populace. Then, he enters one of them, ingests a magical potion, and ascends. Once the ascension is successful, as long as all 9 mausoleums are not destroyed, even if killed, he may be resurrected. My father has another mausoleum that hasn't been discovered yet. Bernadette's eyes widened. After so many years of searching, there was finally hope. George smiled at this. In that case, I agree to your conditions. If he's alive, I'll be looking for him anyway. You know my father. Bernadette's eyes showed doubt. This mysterious person's strength might be at sequence 2 or 3, and he could even read her father's diary. It was indeed possible he knew her father. But why had she never seen him before? George didn't answer this question directly, only revealing a profound expression. The words your father wrote in his diary are incomprehensible to anyone in the world except him, but I can understand them. What do you think? Think about it carefully. Bernadette began to form some guesses. I'll go back to get my diary. We'll meet at the Backland Bridge tomorrow, but before the transaction, I need to sign a spirit contract with you. Is that alright? Even though she felt the other party might actually know her father and was quite friendly, she still felt it was best to sign a contract just in case. With a spirit contract in place, if the other party deceived her, even a sequence 1 would suffer a significant backlash. Of course, no problem, George nodded indifferently. He hadn't intended to deceive Bernadette in the first place, and the spirit contract had no binding force on him. A sequence 1 level backlash wouldn't harm him at all. I still don't know your name. Before leaving through the spirit world, Bernadette paused and asked George. George's eyes lit up. You can call me passerby. I am the follower of the Great Fool. He was a diviner sequence, And in the future, he would advance to sequence 0, becoming the Fool, and also the true Fool of the Tarot Society. So, announcing it in advance was fine. His current identity as Passerby A could be used as the Fool's earthly angel. Later, they could create alternate characters like Passerby B, Passerby C, and Passerby D, all angels on Earth for the Fool. The Fool, Bernadette's doubt flashed briefly. She'd never heard of this deity. Perhaps some ancient god had awakened. Without much thought, she entered the spirit world and vanished. George, having obtained the Black Emperor card, planned to use Flame Leap to return home, but quickly changed his mind. I'll wander around a bit before going back. It was late at night, maybe he'd find a suitable puppet, or even a suitable prey to offer to the church for the next sequence of potion recipes. In the eastern district of Backland, George looked down at a small black dog, about the size of a calf, gnawing on the heart of a female corpse in a dark alley, and couldn't help but stroke his chin. Good luck, a sequence 6 demon from the Abyss Path. Is it preparing for its ascension ritual? The large black dog below wasn't an ordinary dog. It was an extraordinary creature that had reached sequence 6 demon status. Not only humans could use potions to advance, but animals could too. According to Klein, Miss Justice accidentally let her pet dog ingest a potion from a sequence 9 audience member, thus becoming a sequence 9 audience member's extraordinary dog. The big black dog below is probably also someone's extraordinary pet. The ritual for a sequence 6 demon to advance to a sequence 5 apostle of desire involves a series of murders, each time consuming the victim's heart. The minimum is 13, the maximum is 49, the more people killed, the more complete the ritual, and the higher the success rate of advancement. Frankly, a sequence 6 demon can't be exchanged for a sequence 4 potion recipe at the church, but this dog's owner might be a sequence 5 or sequence 4, so there's still a chance. Flame Leap appeared directly in front of the demon black dog. Before the demon black dog could react, George slapped it on the head. The demon black dog's head exploded instantly, losing all life. Extracting its extraordinary characteristics and the black dog's soul, George began searching for clues about its owner. Sequence 5, not bad. Through the black dog's memories, George knew it did indeed have an owner, a sequence 5 apostle of desire hidden in Backland. If it were sequence 4, he could definitely exchange it for the trickster's potion recipe at the church. If it were sequence 5, he'd need several. The soul hasn't completely left the body, so there's still hope. Looking at the girl who had died after her heart was devoured, George reached out and pressed her almost detached soul back into her body. Then, he used light magic to heal her physical body, erasing the horrific memory of being attacked and killed by the demon hound. He was happy to do something as effortless as this when he was in a good mood. Collecting the black dog's corpse, George transformed into flames and leaped to number 6 Edward Street in the West District of Backland. This was a rather luxurious villa. The owner of the villa was Patrick Jason, outwardly a cheerful, enthusiastic, and optimistic middle-aged man. A major shareholder of a small bank. But that was just a disguise. His true identity was a member of the Belial family, his real name being Jason Belial. The Belial family was one of the 3 great families of the blood cult, which worshipped the dark side of the universe, a truly cult-like family. The Abyss Path sequences they controlled were filled with bloody murder and lust, no less than the Aurora Society. A moment later, George, carrying Jason Belial's corpse, showed an interested expression, another assassination attempt on Duke Negan, and they even offered Rosal's Abyss card as payment. The mercenaries are quite powerful. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 769 Assassination of Duke Negan. The sequence 5 Apostle of Desire was as fragile as an egg before George, even in its demonic form, wielding various powerful demonic magic. It couldn't withstand a simple slap from George. However, while killing Jason Belial and searching his memories, George discovered something interesting. Jason had recently received a commission from a mysterious extraordinary individual to assassinate Duke Negan. He would have absolutely refused, having spent over a decade creating this flawless identity. Assassinating Duke Negan would be dangerous, and his identity would certainly be ruined. But the reward was too high. A blasphemy token containing the complete path to godhood from sequence 9 to sequence 0, and all its knowledge, a depravity sequence belonging to his family. How could he refuse? His family did possess depravity sequences, but only up to sequence 4 demons, not the 3 above. This was one reason why his family was now almost extinct, with few experts, forced to hide in various cities. The strongest among them was only sequence 4. How could they possibly withstand the relentless pursuit of the various churches? That's why he planned to send his demon hound out to kill and advance, drawing most of the church's firepower and providing him with an opportunity for assassination. Unfortunately, it died before it could even begin. The demon hound had only killed 3 people when its head was smashed, and George was killed in the process. Then you'll be my first puppet. Let me see who dares to offer a blasphemous card as payment. With a wave of his hand, George slapped Jason Belial's soul, which was about to leave his body, back into it. I'm alive again. However, when Jason Belial opened his eyes, he hadn't even recovered from the joy of his resurrection. His body had already lost control, becoming George's puppet, and his soul was forever trapped within it. Controlling the puppet Jason, George arrived directly above Duke Negan's mansion. Indeed, he was going to complete the mission Jason had given him, kill Duke Negan, obtain the Abyss card, and incidentally meet the person who issued the mission. He felt no remorse for killing Duke Negan. Based on what he'd witnessed while strolling through Backland the previous night, he felt that more than half of Backland's nobility, especially the high-ranking nobles, deserved the death penalty. Duke Negan, the leader of the conservative faction, was a prime example. He'd killed Zelingus, who attacked Duke Negan, because of a commission from Aldra of the Tarot Society. In truth, he wouldn't have helped if it weren't for the commission. With Duke Negan, the leader of the conservatives, dead, the new party's reforms could proceed smoothly. This was a good thing for the common people of the kingdom. The Kingdom of Rune was currently divided into 2 main parties, the conservatives, led by the high-ranking nobles, and the new party, primarily composed of industrial capitalists. Frankly, neither was any good. However, some of the new party's reforms were better for ordinary people. For example, the King of Rune, who now leaned towards the new party, seemed to be implementing environmental policies and improving the performance evaluation and promotion of civil servants. The previously implemented grain law had lowered prices, allowing commoners to buy more food with less money. Of course, don't assume the new party was genuinely acting for the common people's benefit. After the corn laws were enacted, prices dropped, but farmers' incomes also fell, forcing them to work in city factories to make a living. Therefore, he believed the new party's true purpose was simply to create more factory workers to generate income for them. Duke Negan was the leader of the Conservative Party. Anyone who wanted him dead and could afford the cost of a blasphemous card was a suspect. George already had a guess. It was most likely the new party, and not just any ordinary new party. Those factory owners and big capitalists, even if they had extraordinary abilities, wouldn't be very strong, unable to produce something of the blasphemous card's level. The only ones with that kind of power were probably the Rune royal family, who had been supporting the new party for years. The Augustus family of the Rune royal family had long controlled the entire judgment pathway, and had true experts of Sequence 1, Sequence 2, and Sequence 3 levels. Discovering the blasphemous card made by Rosal and presenting it as a mission reward made sense. It was probably to avoid suspicion that they didn't act personally, but instead hired a cultist like Jason. However, a question lingered in his mind. The lone royal family, supposedly the most powerful noble family, didn't support the conservatives but instead supported the new party, pushing various reform policies. Was it truly because the king cared for his people and wanted to improve their lives through reform? Eye of exploration. After observing the guards within the Duke's mansion, George tossed the puppet Jason into his own world. It still needs further modifications to strengthen its power. Duke Negan was a Sequence 6 judge. Although high-ranking and lacking combat experience, he was still extraordinary. He was surrounded by numerous punishers of the Storm Church and his own personal guards, including several Sequence 5 extraordinary. In a normal assassination attempt, the Sequence 5 Jason had no chance of winning. He wouldn't even have the chance to get close to Duke Negan before being killed by the guards. But that wasn't the most crucial point. The most crucial point was what he'd heard from Rattle of the Storm Church. After the last assassination attempt by Zelingus, Archbishop Ace Snake, the Singer of God, of the Backland Diocese of the Storm Lord Church. He then entrusted a conch shell imbued with magical power to Duke Negan. Whenever Duke Negan encountered danger, he could simply blow the conch, and the divine singer, Ace Snake, would arrive on the wind within seconds to provide support. Duke Negan was the leader of the Conservative Party and also a representative figure of the Storm Lord's Church in maintaining a balance of power against the lone royal family. The lone royal family possessed a Sequence 1 level powerhouse, a power even the Church lacked. Without some form of checks and balances, they might harbor ill intentions towards the Church. The Dark Goddess Church also had a representative figure in the King's faction, Count Hall, the father of Lady Justice, Audrey. Therefore, the Storm Lord's Church placed great importance on protecting Duke Negan. Jason's original plan was to use his beloved dog to attract the attention of both churches, then the mysterious figure would send someone to lure away the Sequence 4 Divine Singer, and then lead Duke Negan into a trap. He would then assassinate Duke Negan from within the trap. Finally, he would safely evacuate Backland, taking the Abyss Guard to hide in other countries. George didn't have the patience to wait. He wanted to complete the mission tonight and then wait for the mysterious man to come and hand over the Abyss Guard. But Jason's Sequence 5 strength alone certainly wouldn't be enough. That's why he needed to modify and upgrade it. Chapter 770. What a powerful demon. In essence, the Abyss sequence is about transforming people into demons. Reaching Sequence 0 transforms one into a true Demon King. A prime example is Fabuti, one of the ancient gods and the Demon King. George, naturally, has also studied demons. Many demons in the fairy tale world were created by Zareth, with the strongest demon, and, being Natsu. Therefore, George can certainly create and modify demons. His strength far surpasses Zareth's. If you were to seriously dedicate time to modifying and creating demons, his power, while not necessarily comparable to the true gods of this world, could very well reach the level of Sequence 2. Even just slightly modifying Jason now would be enough to handle Sequence 4. It's not about killing Sequence 4, the goal is simply to assassinate Duke Negan and escape from the clutches of the God Singer of Sequence 4. Half an hour later, he pulled Jason from his world. Jason's outward appearance remained unchanged, but his inner self had been significantly altered. Go, little Jason. Using the threads of his spirit body to control his demonized puppet, Jason leaped into the air, directly over the walls of the Duke's mansion, and jumped towards Duke Negan's room. Thanks to George's modifications, Jason's physical strength after demonization had increased more than 100-fold. Therefore, a single leap could traverse 1,000 meters. The loud whooshing sound naturally attracted the attention of the guards, and the Punishers used their abilities to fly up, unleashing a barrage of silver lightning bolts at Jason. George controlled Jason, conjuring an exaggerated giant sword made of crimson magma and pale blue flames in his hand. With a casual swing in midair, he dispelled all the lightning. The Abyss sequence possessed the ability to condense a magma giant sword at Sequence 6. However, if Jason, originally at Sequence 5, were to use it, it would be impossible to dispel the lightning bolts unleashed by several Sequence 5 and Sequence 6 Punishers at once. The result should have been that the flaming giant sword was dispelled, while Jason was electrocuted and fell to the ground. But now that George had enhanced Jason's fire abilities, he easily blocked the attack. Because Jason jumped so fast, even the Punishers couldn't intercept him in time. So he landed precisely in the room where Duke Negan was. Actually, because of the last assassination attempt, Duke Negan didn't sleep in his own room at night, he just slept in a guest room. If you landed in his nominal room, you wouldn't find him. Unfortunately, George's eye of insight had already seen everything in Duke Negan's mansion and knew which room he was in. Duke Negan was sitting on his bed, forcing a beautiful young maid to serve him, when he was startled by Jason's sudden appearance. However, being an extraordinary one, he instinctively picked up the conch shell around his neck and blew it. It was a conch shell that could summon the Singer of Gods. As he blew the conch shell, he also used his ability on the intruder Jason. Imprisonment, a highly viscous, transparent liquid instantly enveloped Jason, attempting to immobilize him. However, George merely controlled Jason's body to emit some demonic flames, instantly turning the transparent liquid into steam, offering no resistance whatsoever. Duke Negan's expression changed drastically upon seeing this, realizing that the assassin was far stronger than himself. He stopped attacking, grabbed the maid beneath him and threw her at Jason, then, without even bothering to pull up his trousers, rushed towards the window. Once he escaped and reunited with the guards, he would be safe. And when the Singer of God arrived, they could capture the assassin alive and interrogate him to find out who wanted to kill him. He angrily resolved that if he survived this time, He would avenge himself on the 2 assassination attempts at any cost. However, he had only just turned around when his body was split in 2. It turned out that George had controlled Jason to dodge the maid and wield a flaming longsword. The difference in speed ruined Duke Negan's escape plan. However, if Duke Negan had fought bravely instead of running away, the outcome would have been the same. Because the abilities of a Sequence 6 judge were simply incapable of breaking through Jason's enhanced body. How dare you! After George controlled the puppet Jason to retract Duke Negan's extraordinary abilities, the guards finally rushed into the room. Seeing Duke Negan cleaved in 2, their eyes widened in fury. Ignoring the ordinary maid still in the room, they instantly unleashed their most powerful abilities. Wind blades, lightning, and massive energy whips filled the room. For both the church's punishers and the Duke's guards, the death of a mere maid was insignificant. The most important thing was to keep the assassin who killed Duke Negan alive. That's why I'm more inclined towards the Church of the Night Goddess. George shook his head, controlling the puppet Jason to slam the flaming greatsword into the ground, creating a massive wall of fire that blocked all attacks. He also managed to save the maid, who was nearly paralyzed with fear. Lie down and rest. Jason's 2 curved demon horns unleashed a powerful mental shockwave, causing the guards to collapse to the ground, their eyes rolling back in their heads. This was one of the abilities of the Abyss Sequence 5 Desire Apostle, Mental Shock. Under George's modifications and enhancements, its power doubled. They came really fast. Just as George controlled Jason to jump, he felt a gust of wind arrive above the Duke. It was the Archbishop of the Church of Storms, Sequence 4, the Divine Singer Ace Snake. He wore a black soft hat, had silver eyes, and wore a black robe embroidered with storm symbols, presenting the image of a serious old man. You're asking for death? Upon discovering that Duke Negan was dead and the murderer was on the run, his face revealed a furious expression, and countless lightning bolts struck the demonized Jason like a storm. The matter was over, and George did not intend to kill the Archbishop of the Church of Storms. So he controlled Jason without retaliating, enduring all the lightning bolts, and quickly escaped into a densely populated residential area with a few leaps. Before Ace Snake could catch up, he absorbed Jason into his world, turning him into flames and disappearing from the spot. He reappeared in the villa where Jason used to live. After healing Jason, who had been charred black by the lightning, he returned him to normal and then disappeared again into flames. He would then remotely control Jason to continue operating as a major shareholder of the bank until the mysterious person who issued the mission came to fulfill the conditions. He wasn't worried about the mysterious person reneging on the agreement. Because the mysterious person and Jason had also signed a spirit contract, and even a Sequence 1 would suffer a backlash if the mysterious person reneged. The mysterious person couldn't possibly be a Sequence 0, it would be too beneath Sequence 0 to personally hire someone to kill a Duke. What a powerful demon. On the other side, watching the demon that had withstood his full force attack disappear into the slums, the Singer of God's expression was quite grim. Chapter 771 Wishing Lamp. It's digested already? Faster than I expected. Back home, lying in his crib, George discovered that the potion in his body had already been digested. He had just transformed a puppet and acted out the act for less than an hour. But thinking about it, it made sense, considering the puppet he transformed was a Sequence 5 level puppet. Moreover, he had manipulated the puppet behind the scenes to assassinate Duke Negan, take down a group of Sequence 5 and Sequence 6 guards, and escaped from the pursuit of a Sequence 4 demigod. Most importantly, he hadn't been exposed. Everyone thought that he was the one who manipulated the puppet, not the puppeteer behind it. The whole process perfectly conformed to the puppeteer's acting rules, so the digestion was naturally fast. Think about it, if it were a normal Sequence 5 puppeteer, trying to assassinate Duke Negan alone, they would probably be dead by now. Jason's original assassination plan also required the cooperation of the mysterious person from multiple sides to have any chance of success. The more dangerous the potion's acting and the stronger the participants, the better the digestion effect. If it were just a peaceful transformation of a Sequence 9 puppet that posed no threat to him, then, he controlled the puppet to perform a puppet show. Even if the entire process went flawlessly, it would probably take at least 10 or 8 years to digest the potion. The next day, everything was normal. However, news of Duke Negan's assassination spread throughout Backland, causing a huge uproar. As a Duke of the Kingdom, the leader of the Conservatives, and a representative figure of the Storm Church Kingdom, to be assassinated by someone forcefully breaking into his mansion was truly shocking. Of course, The official news stated that the assassin who killed Duke Negan had been killed on the spot, not escaped. As for the identity of the assassin, it was naturally the infamous Aurora Society madman. Usually, in similar cases, before the murderer could be found, the blame would be placed on the Aurora Society. Mainly because the Aurora Society, as the scapegoat, would never deny it, and would even impersonate the true creator to spread the power of their so-called creator. The puppet Jason continued to live his life as a banker normally, without revealing any flaws. The mysterious man did not immediately appear to deliver the payment. Clearly, his sudden and ruthless killing of Duke Negan had surprised even the mysterious man. The mysterious person in their organization would probably need to verify something before contacting him. He wasn't in a hurry, it was bound to happen sooner or later. That evening, George arrived at the Backland Bridge in the George district of Backland, known as the Slums. This was the place he had arranged to meet Bernadette the day before. The bridge was silent in the pitch-black night. No one was moving around at this hour, even the soldiers guarding the bridge were dozing. As if sensing George's arrival, green pea vines hung down from above, intertwining to form a ladder. Seeing this, George calmly climbed the ladder to the top of the pea vines. "Let's begin." Bernadette, dressed as a female pirate, had been waiting for a long time. Without any preamble, she immediately signed the critical contract with George. Because of Bernadette's strength, and the fact that her sequence pathway was proficient in mysticism, unless George was a true god, it was absolutely impossible for him to break the contract and deceive her. George also naturally completed the contract. He had no intention of deceiving Bernadette, and besides, the contract was useless to him. However, the process of signing the contract gave him a clearer understanding of the mystical knowledge of this world. Knowledge gleaned from the hidden sage was, after all, just knowledge. It would take time to fully digest it. Having a Sequence 3 language master personally demonstrate it naturally accelerated the process. "Here are all the diaries I have collected." With the contract signed, Bernadette confidently handed George a thick stack of diaries. "Want me to read them all to you?" George asked with a smile, taking the diaries. Bernadette paused for a moment. "No need. You can read them yourself. Just tell me some key clues after you're done." She was afraid that reading her father's diaries and learning about the outrageous things he did in his youth would make him too angry to continue searching for clues. George nodded, and the diaries in his hand immediately began to automatically turn the pages at an incredible speed. In just a few seconds, all the contents of the diaries entered his mind. Roselle went to the Red Moon and seemed to have been infected there, which is why his personality changed so drastically in his later years. He himself realized this, which is why he tried to forcibly jump to the Black Emperor sequence, hoping to use the Black Emperor's ability to resurrect to escape the corruption. So it's indeed possible that he's still alive. As for why he hasn't been resurrected yet, something must have gone wrong. George summarized the contents of the diary he had seen. Also, there's a clue to the location of his final tomb. It was built on the nameless island he discovered during his voyages, the one that led to the deaths of Green, William, and Polly. The exact location of that nameless island isn't written in the diary. But you can start with Edwards, Benjamin Abraham, and the descendants of the 3 deceased. Sure enough, I knew there was something wrong. Bernadette's eyes welled up slightly after hearing George's summary and analysis. She knew that her most admired father, the man who had created countless miracles, couldn't have suddenly become so cold and ruthless. "Thank you." Bernadette bowed to George in gratitude, then hesitated for a moment before saying, "If I find the island's location, could you please help me? I will pay you accordingly." As a master of prophecy, she vaguely saw the danger of that nameless island. Even though she was already Sequence 3, going alone would be a near certain death. The turning point was this man before her. She couldn't foresee this man's future, but her prophetic abilities told her that as long as she had this man with her, the danger would be greatly reduced. Fearing George would refuse, she directly presented the reward. "It's called the Wishing Lamp, a sealed artifact left to me by my father. It's incredibly powerful, capable of granting its holder any 10 wishes. You could even become a true god. It can help you achieve that. But it's also very dangerous, because some wishes are granted in extremely distorted forms. For example, if you wish to become a true god, it might summon an evil god to merge with you, making you a part of that evil god, thus becoming a true god in the same way. However, as long as you don't make a third wish, and the first 2 wishes are reasonable, you can still avoid danger by using some linguistic skills." The wishing lamp was the most powerful sealed artifact Bernadette had ever seen. bar none. But compared to finding and rescuing her father, that was nothing. Chapter 772 The Twilight Hermit's Meeting. Interesting, George's eyes lit up the moment he saw the wishing lamp. First, he sensed the high-sequence extraordinary characteristics of his own sequence within the lamp. If he wasn't mistaken, its energy intensity should reach sequence 2. The Church of the Goddess of the Night had said that the potion recipes they possessed for the diviner sequence only went up to sequence 1. The materials they could provide for diviner potions only went up to sequence 4. They couldn't obtain the main ingredients for sequence 3, sequence 2, and sequence 1 potions, let alone sequence 0. So, once he reached sequence 4, he could only exchange potion recipes for cultists, and he would have to find the potions himself. The lamp, possessing the extraordinary characteristics of sequence 2, could be extracted to create potions for sequence 2. Second, he saw a sealed soul within the wishing lamp. This wasn't an ordinary soul, but one even more powerful than a true god. He felt that the extraordinary characteristics of sequence 2 were only a small part of the reason for the wishing lamp's powerful and distorted effects. The main reason was the soul that infused the extraordinary characteristics with powerful spiritual energy. If he could directly devour that soul, perhaps he wouldn't need to advance to sequence 0 or complete the power conversion to obtain true god-level spiritual power. His current spiritual energy level is at most sequence 4. Part of it comes from the extraordinary characteristics of a sequence 5 puppet master, and the other part is spiritual power he converted from the power he received. Therefore, the power of his converted magic is basically at the sequence 4 level. Some spells are powerful enough to surpass sequence 4, but due to the limitation of spiritual energy, they can't surpass it by much. The only spell comparable to true god-level attacks, the Fairy Law, primarily consumes life force rather than spiritual power. However, by bringing the soul from the magic lamp into his world and directly devouring it, he could directly raise his spiritual energy to the true god level. At that time, although he would still be a sequence 5 puppet master, his spiritual energy would have reached the true god level. If it were an ordinary extraordinary being, even with true body level spiritual energy, they would still be at sequence 5. That would only allow him to use extraordinary power at sequence 5, at most because he had enough spiritual energy to unleash skills infinitely. But this spiritual energy was different in George's hands. Using the converted magic, he could unleash true god-level magic. Furthermore, a soul even more powerful than a true god would surely possess a great deal of mystical knowledge and a complete sequence formula. This was another unexpected gain. Take this. When you find the nameless island, input a wisp of spiritual energy into it before you set off, and I'll be able to sense it. George readily agreed to the deal, handing Bernadette a temporarily condensed fire orb. As long as Bernadette input spiritual energy into the fire orb, he could leap across it with flames. I'll find the island's location as soon as possible. Bernadette took the fire orb, withdrew her mystical abilities, and vanished across the spirit world onto the backland bridge. George, now back on the bridge, looked at the vanished peas and chuckled. This ability of mysterious reappearance is quite interesting. The pea forest Bernadette conjured was actually an ability she awakened as a mystic sequence 4 mystic, called Mystic Reappearance. Its main function is to allow extraordinary individuals to draw power from their acquired mystical knowledge to create magic or witchcraft. The fewer people who know the corresponding mystical knowledge, the less widely it is circulated, the more powerful the spell. Normally, this ability is average. After all, any well-known story will generally spread, and the more people know it, the weaker the spell's power. However, Bernadette's father, Roselle, his real name is Wong Tao, was a modern soul. So, Bernadette heard many fairy tales unknown to people of this era from her father from a young age. She transformed those fairy tales into corresponding fairy tale magic through mysterious reappearance. Because so few people knew them, the power was immense, even if counted individually. The peas just now were clearly created using Jack and the Beanstalk. Although I didn't get any other clues about the blasphemous cards, I did get a lot of information about the Fourth Age, and even found a wishing lamp. Not bad. George transformed into his baby form, flew into the air, and hummed a little tune in a good mood, patrolling the skies above Backland again. Bernadette brought many diaries this time, but none contained any clues about the blasphemous cards. Most of them were about Wong Tao's philandering life, whether it was having affairs with a noblewoman or a noblewoman's daughter. Basically, if someone was beautiful, even a witch, he'd have his way with them. A small portion recorded his infection and the construction of 9 mausoleums, his plan to turn to the Black Emperor path to save himself. One part that particularly interested George was about an organization Wong Tao had joined called the Twilight Hermits. What surprised him was that the Twilight Hermits not only had many powerful extraordinary beings, but they also possessed the second blasphemous tablet. Wong Tao was able to create the blasphemous cards because he had seen the second blasphemous tablet. This organization believed that people gradually lose themselves until they fall asleep, therefore, they must diligently observe and remember themselves, relying on this and various forms of knowledge to achieve purification and preparation for the final apocalypse. They preserve and pass down secrets from thousands of years ago, believing that twilight is inevitable and the end times are unavoidable. They believe in the original creator, believing that he has not truly died. When twilight arrives, when the end of everything comes, he will awaken from his slumber, returning everything to himself, and creating a new world, a new history. This organization is also extremely hostile to the true creator, sparing no effort in describing him with various words that express depravity and evil. They also possess the ability to know everything that is said. Simply mentioning this organization will be sensed by its leader. Furthermore, the way members attend gatherings is peculiar, as if they are gathering in a dream. Based on various pieces of information, plus the intelligence previously obtained from the true creator, he speculated that the leader of the Twilight Hermits was most likely one of the contingency plans for the resurrection of the ancient sun god. The embodiment of the ancient sun god's divinity, the imaginary angel Adam, one of the 8 archangels. Adam is the sequence 1 rider of the audience sequence, possessing the uniqueness of the audience sequence. Chapter 773 Human Trafficking Case. Kidnapping. He had originally intended to patrol and see if he could catch a few troublemaking cult members, but instead, he encountered a kidnapping in the dead of night. In a dimly lit alley below, a burly man in a leather jacket covered the mouth of a young girl returning home late at night and forcibly dragged her into a carriage. "Well, I'm in a good mood today, so I'll be a superhero in this world for once." Kidnapping, murder, rape, and other illegal crimes happen every day in Backland, especially in the slums. Normally, he wouldn't get involved, otherwise he'd probably spend all his time rescuing people. That was the police department's responsibility. But today, he was in a good mood and was willing to play the superhero and save the kidnapped girl. In a flash, he disappeared from his spot and appeared in the carriage. "Don't speak, don't struggle, or I'll slit your throat right now." Inside the carriage, he slapped her twice, then continued to hold the dagger to the girl's neck. The girl's cries for help stopped abruptly. She covered her face, her expression filled with terror. She was just the daughter of a laundry worker in the slums. During the day, she helped her mother with laundry to supplement the family income, and at night she attended a free school run by the church to learn to read. She hoped to change her fate of continuing to work as a laundry worker through her own efforts. But tonight, on her way home, she was kidnapped. Looking at the kidnapper's fierce appearance and the sharp dagger, despair filled her heart. In fact, disappearances were common in the slums, and most were girls like her. They disappeared and never returned. Therefore, she always chose safer routes patrolled by police, even if it meant taking a longer route. She never expected to be kidnapped. "Please, let me go. I can give you money." The girl's hands trembled as she took out her only 4 pence. It was money she had slowly saved from washing countless clothes, intended to buy a new notebook for taking notes in class. "If it weren't for my parents' orders, I would have taken care of you right here in the car." "Money, your body is the most valuable thing." The man in the leather jacket looked at the trembling girl, unable to resist reaching out his hand, a twisted smile on his face. These captured girls were first sent for training, then given to powerful figures to enjoy. Only when the powerful figures grew tired of them would it be their turn to enjoy them. When the powerful figures grew tired of them, they were sold to other empires to become the lowest of slaves or money-making machines. So, for now, he could only indulge himself temporarily, and would have to wait several months before he could properly enjoy them. But that didn't matter. Once he returned, he could enjoy the girls he had kidnapped months ago. However, just as his hand was about to touch a girl, he suddenly froze. A flash of fire appeared beside the girl, and a strange infant appeared. The infant merely glanced at him, and a great fear instantly rose in his heart. An extraordinary, he deliberately raised his voice, intending to warn his companions riding outside, but as soon as he finished speaking, his body stiffened, turning him into a puppet to be controlled. What he didn't know was that his companions had already become puppets first and couldn't hear his warning. A kidnapper actually knows about extraordinary beings. George's face showed a hint of interest upon hearing the leather-clad man's words before he was turned into a puppet. It's important to understand that the existence of extraordinary individuals is known to only a very small number of people. Even many government officials and members of parliament are unaware of it. For a mere kidnapper from a slum to know about extraordinary individuals is quite interesting. George placed his hand on the leather-clad man's forehead, instantly reviewing his memories. Captain, Parker, Katie, Horace, human trafficking is actually linked to high-ranking nobles and the military. That's quite valuable. Stroking his chin, George felt that his intervention might actually yield some reward. From the leather-clad man's memories, he learned that the man's mastermind was called Captain, ostensibly a famous and wealthy man in Backland, but actually Backland's biggest human trafficker. The fact that he could conduct large-scale human trafficking in Backland without being discovered by the police or the church was naturally because he had powerful backers. Parker, Katie, and Horace, three mysterious extraordinary individuals, possessed not only immense power but also powerful backgrounds. Even many high-ranking officials gave them face, turning a blind eye to Captain's human trafficking activities. The abilities displayed by George's three accomplices confirmed that all three possessed the judgment path, with the strongest, Heroes, potentially reaching sequence 6 strength. The judgment path was a sequence path controlled by the lone royal family, outsiders, high-ranking nobles, and the military. Obtaining the corresponding potion formulas was extremely difficult. Even if someone did, like Hugh, they would at most reach sequence 9 or sequence 8, advancing by chance. It was impossible for three of them to simultaneously possess the judgment path. Furthermore, given that many high-ranking officials showed them respect, he could boldly guess that the three were either from a high-ranking noble family or the military. Further investigation might uncover something even more significant. Selling them to the Church of the Night Goddess could likely be exchanged for a sequence 4 potion formula and the merit of the potion. Human trafficking, if not involving extraordinary beings, was primarily handled by the kingdom's police system. However, if extraordinary beings were involved, it would be handed over to the church. This was because human trafficking sometimes involved more than just human trafficking. It could also involve matters like the worship of evil gods. A trembling voice interrupted George's thoughts. He looked at the girl, whose face was filled with terror and confusion, and waved his hand. This is their reward for scaring you. Go home. All the gold pounds in the pockets of the burly man in the car and the man in the leather jacket fell into the girl's hands. Before she could react, she found herself engulfed in flames, and then she was back on the street where she had been kidnapped. If it weren't for the banknotes in her hand, she would have thought that everything that had just happened was a dream. 20 pounds. After counting all the banknotes in her hand, the girl was dumbfounded. So much money was enough for her family to escape the poorest life in Backland and become ordinary residents. The rich get richer, and the poor get poorer. It's not just because of mindset and ability, but more importantly, the difference in initial wealth. A rich second generation with tens of millions in assets, even if he was a fool, could still earn a large sum of money every month by depositing all his money in a bank account to earn interest. Some poor people, especially those with elderly parents and young children to support, cannot afford to eat if they don't earn money for a month, and have no way to change their current life. Chapter 774 Hull is empty, all the devils are here. This was the girl's family situation. If either of her parents fell ill and couldn't work, their earnings wouldn't be enough to cover rent and food. Only by working non-stop could they maintain their current lifestyle. Many homeless people who starved or froze to death in the slums did so because illness cut off their income, forcing them to rely on welfare. Welfare, at best, only kept them from starving. They lacked the strength to find new work, thus trapping them in a vicious cycle. Until a few times, they missed out on welfare and starved or froze to death on park benches. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for your generosity. The girl knelt on the ground, deeply grateful for the baby who had suddenly appeared. She felt it must be a divine being. She then carefully hid the gold pound in her pocket and ran home. With this money, they could move out of the slums and rent a slightly more decent place. Her father could recuperate, no longer doing the low-paying, exhausting daily manual labor, and find a proper factory job. His mother could also give up her laundry work, buy a sewing machine, and mend and tailor clothes for others, increasing her income several times over. She herself no longer needed to help her mother with laundry. She could study during the day, striving to get into university and completely change the family's fate. Above a large villa on Iris Street near the west end of the Jowood district, boasting expansive lawns, wide gardens, a small fountain plaza, and marble statues, George activated his detective eye, surveying the entire villa. In the opulent hall, pure and beautiful young girls were being brutally violated, and those violating them were high-ranking officials frequently featured in the newspapers. Vicious maids and servants watched over them. If the girls resisted or weren't enthusiastic enough, they would be mercilessly whipped. If they displeased the officials, they would be dragged away by their hair, their fate predictable. Although the hall didn't depict any rituals for summoning evil gods, the scenes of depravity were no less egregious than those rituals performed by evil gods. Seated at the highest position in the hall were several extraordinary individuals, led by Sequence 6 heroes. Opposite them were high-ranking officials such as members of the lower house, the deputy commissioner of the police department, and the deputy mayor of the city hall. The obese captain was obsequiously ingratiating himself with these people, instructing his servants to provide them with the most satisfactory service. Directly below the hall was a hidden underground prison larger than the villa. Inside were young girls full of youthful vitality, some undergoing various forms of discipline, and others being punished. Hell is truly empty, and all the devils are here on earth. George couldn't help but sigh after taking in everything. Sometimes, these nobles and officials, who had no bottom line for money, power, and profit, were more like cultists than cultists themselves. Raising his right hand, George aimed at the member of parliament below who was enjoying the warmth beneath him with his eyes closed, and smiled slightly. Bang! An air bullet shot out from George's index finger, piercing through the roof of the villa and instantly blowing the member of parliament's head off. He had used the magician's ability, the air bullet. Even at Sequence 5, the magician's air bullets were only slightly more powerful than ordinary pistols, unable to penetrate the villa's roof, let alone blow someone's head off right under the nose of a Sequence 6 user. But George wasn't using ordinary air bullets, he was using modified ones incorporating special laws. They could slice through even 100 layers of steel plates like tofu, let alone a villa roof. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat, George's fingers tapped rapidly, and air bullets fired like a machine gun, accurately exploding the heads of every perpetrator below. To understand the mastermind, he only needed to spare those few extraordinary individuals. As for these high-ranking officials and nobles, it was better to kill them all. Otherwise, handing them over to the church, if their family background was strong enough, might not result in a death sentence. A little money might get them out. Even in a relatively fair modern society, with enough background, there are ways to escape the death penalty. Let alone in a feudal society where nobles and officials wielded immense power. In just a few breaths, besides the young girls, only the three extraordinary individuals, including heroes, remained alive in the entire villa. Even Captain died on the ground, his face filled with disbelief. Run, Horace, realizing what had happened, changed his expression drastically and roared as he led Katie and Parker to flee the villa. Anyone capable of wiping out so many people in the villa in just a few breaths was definitely a high-sequence extraordinary being. Unfortunately, just as he stood up, he saw an infant appear before them. "It's you, so you know me." George knew he hadn't guessed wrong. These three were definitely connected to the military or high nobility. Aside from the two major churches, he had only publicly fought at Duke Negan's banquet, where the kingdom's high nobility were present. Imprisonment, whip of pain, mental pierce, the three didn't answer but simultaneously attacked George. Having easily killed the Sequence 5 Kalingas, military records judged George's strength to be that of a Sequence 4 demigod. Escaping from a Sequence 4 was impossible without a desperate fight. Overestimating yourselves, ignoring the three men's ticklish attacks, George raised his hand and fired a series of shots, instantly severing all three men's limbs, turning them into human pigs lying on the ground. "Don't kill us. We're on a secret mission. We're military extraordinary individuals." "It's a misunderstanding." Terrified, Horace hurriedly explained, realizing that a single move had rendered them all incapable of fighting. He wasn't lying. They were indeed extraordinary individuals from the military, ordered by their superiors to help card with human trafficking. But this was top secret and couldn't be told to anyone. Now that they were about to die, they could only use this to buy time until higher-ups from the military came to their rescue. A misunderstanding? I'll find out soon enough. George stepped forward, taking away each of their extraordinary characteristics with a single blow, and then began reading their memories. After a moment, a look of doubt appeared on his face. What does the military need so many slaves for? He wasn't wrong. These three were indeed from the military, and their direct superior was a demigod within the military. 3 years ago, they were tasked with helping Captain establish a massive underground human trafficking organization. Ostensibly for profit, the real purpose was to purchase large numbers of slaves and collect people through maritime channels. Where those people ended up and what their purpose was, the three had no idea. Let the church deal with that, George said, having stopped the bleeding and spared their lives, deliberately creating a huge fireball above the villa. Soon, two figures arrived. They were demigods from the Church of the Goddess of Night and the Church of the Lord of Storms, and also old acquaintances of George, Crystal and Radar. Chapter 775 The Mysterious Man's Identity. Good evening, you two, George greeted them with a smile. The military's secret purchase of a large number of people clearly indicated they were planning something big, and behind the military was the Rune royal family. The Rune royal family had experts at the first and second rank. If he went directly to capture the military demigod and search his soul, it would definitely cause conflict, and he might even get ganged up on. Although he wasn't afraid, it would still be troublesome. It would be better to let the church investigate. Once they had the results, if they needed his help in the battle, he could then go and help. It wouldn't be a waste of time. George, what's going on? Christian and Radar looked at the mutilated heroes and the others, as well as the naked girls who were gradually emerging from the villa below. Their faces were full of confusion. George pointed at heroes and the others, briefly explaining the situation. We went out for a stroll tonight, hoping to catch a few cultists, but instead we ran into human traffickers. What? These guys are from MI9. Upon hearing George's account, Crusade's expression darkened, while Radar was so angry his beard almost bristled. Military extraordinary individuals secretly supporting human traffickers for large-scale human trafficking behind the church's back. This was utterly audacious. Both being demigods who had risen through countless extraordinary experiences, they knew that anything requiring a large number of people was never a good thing. Their superior seems to be named Celt, George added. Saint Celt, Creste and Radar exchanged a glance, their expressions turning grave. Saint Celt, a demigod in the Rune military, a royal descendant extraordinary individual. If before it could be explained as some military extraordinary individuals wanting to use their power for human trafficking, now that the royal family was involved, things were likely much more complicated. What is the royal family's purpose in secretly conducting large-scale human smuggling? George, leave the rest to us. Thank you for your help. Once you've digested the potion, you can come to me for the Sequence 4 potion recipe. If you need a mission to capture a Sequence 4 powerhouse, feel free to contact me anytime. George nodded, transforming into a ball of fire and disappearing from the spot. The church's resident experts and backline are at most Sequence 4. If they really want to capture a saint, they'll definitely need his help, an expert who can absolutely overpower a Sequence 4. That way, they can exchange him for Sequence 4 potion ingredients. As for the advancement ceremony, it requires killing a Sequence 4 demigod or an extraordinary creature of equal strength in front of a large audience. This is easy to arrange. Going a little too hard and accidentally killing the saint is plausible. After all, it's normal to lose control when fighting a demigod. Back home, George no longer cared about the subsequent investigations of the two churches, but instead focused his energy on researching transformation magic. He was currently focusing on the magic of finding people. If Bernadette couldn't find any clues about the nameless island, he could directly use the magic of finding people to search for it. However, he hadn't been studying for long when he was interrupted. Someone had come to see the puppet Jason he controlled late at night. It was the mysterious person who had given Jason the mission. You didn't follow the plan. The mysterious person appeared silently in the room, his voice full of authority. George controlled the puppet Jason and laughed. Just tell me if the mission was completed or not. You're not trying to renege on your promise, are you? Of course not. It's just a mere blasphemy card. The mysterious person tossed out a tarot card with special power, and George controlled the puppet Jason to catch it. After a quick glance, it was the blasphemy card, which recorded the recipes and detailed information of various sequence potions from the Abyss Path. Your strength is quite good. If you are willing to continue working for us, we can provide you with the corresponding potion materials for the later sequences. Seeing that Jason had put away the blasphemy card but hadn't left, the mysterious person had the intention of recruiting him. He hadn't expected Jason to be so much stronger than he'd anticipated, actually managing to kill Duke Negan in the Duke's mansion with sheer power. And he'd even escaped unscathed from the pursuit of a demigod from the church. With such strength, there were likely many things they couldn't handle themselves, which Jason could take care of. Very tempting, but I'm a little curious, who exactly are you people? Why did you kill Duke Negan? George controlled Jason, scrutinizing the mysterious figure. Through his observation and senses, the mysterious figure's energy fluctuations were around sequence 5. He could even tell which sequence it was. Just like the people he'd just dismembered at the Captain Villa, they were all on the judgment path. Therefore, the mysterious figure was most likely a powerful military figure, which was consistent with his previous guess. The royal family wanted to eliminate Negan, the leader of the conservative faction, to render the conservatives leaderless, thus facilitating the passage of various reform policies. Because this is the choice of the times. It hindered the development of the times and the resurrection of the true creator, so it must die. As for us, you can call us the Twilight Hermits. We merely let the tide of the times flow in the direction it was destined to go, the mysterious man replied with a devout expression. George was stunned for a moment after hearing this. The Twilight Hermits were not the organization created by Adam. Rosal was once a member. So it wasn't the royal family, it was Adam who wanted to kill Duke Negan. Or rather, it was Adam who cooperated with the royal family to kill Duke Negan. You'll see, George's true form suddenly appeared in the room as a flame, and then reached out to grab the mysterious man. How could it be you? The mysterious man was shocked to see George appear and immediately activated his ability. Death, powerful spiritual energy surged into his fist, and he punched George in the chest. Sequence 5 of the Judgment sequence is called the Punishment Night. At this stage, his physical body will be greatly enhanced. Combined with a fist that represents the power of death, even a Sequence 4 would not dare to meet it. Unfortunately, he encountered George. The punch landed on George, who didn't even blink, completely ignoring it. Despite the mysterious man being an adult and George an infant, their physical strength was actually reversed. Against George, the mysterious man's punch felt like a baby's. Not good, the punch had no effect, and the mysterious man tried to continue attacking, but quickly found his body stiffening, instantly losing control. Soul Search, George, after transforming the mysterious man into a puppet, began searching his memories. He really is a member of the Twilight Hermits. It turned out this mysterious man was named Lockhart Sickham, ostensibly Duke Negan's secretary, a top agent sent by MI9 to protect Duke Negan. But in reality, he had already joined the Twilight Hermits, a spy sent by them. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.